Now, second, I call to order the Monday, September 18th, 2017 regular board meeting. Jackie, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Razak.
Here.
Mr. Karubas.
Here.
Miss Peel. Here. Miss Donahue. Here. Mr. Rising.
Here.
Miss Price.
Here.
Miss Deming.
Here.
Thank you. Mrs. Peel, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I think we have, if everyone notes their agenda, we do need to conduct the budget hearing at 7:05, and it has to be exactly at 7:05. But we have time for a board salute. So, Ms. Donahue, would you read that, please?
Sure. The National Merit Scholarship Corporation announced 45 students from District 204 have been identified as semifinalists in the 63rd Annual National Merit Scholarship Program. There are 10 students from Matea, 28 students from Neuqua Valley, and 7 students from Wabansie Valley. Approximately 16,000 semifinalists throughout the nation are being recognized for their exceptional academic promise. These academically talented high school seniors have an opportunity to continue in the competition for national merit scholarships worth more than $32 million that will be offered next spring. Congratulations to all, and good luck in the competition as it moves forward.
Great, thank you. Do you have the time?
7:02.
Maybe we move forward with the student representative report?
Can our student do it in 3 minutes?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
All right.
Let's,
Do
well,
you
take,
do it in 3 minutes?
can you do it in 3 minutes?
3 minutes?
Oh, okay.
How about 2 minutes?
Hello, I'm Caitlin Baki, and I'm currently a junior at Neuqua Valley High School. I'm excited to be the school board representative this year. Before school started, we hosted a new student orientation as well as freshman orientation. Our first day of school was on August 24th. We had Chromebook Essentials taught during first and second period classes on August 28th and 29th. Our new teacher induction meeting was held on August 30th. We had curriculum nights on August 31st and September 7th. Yesterday, we successfully hosted our annual Tom Schlegel 5K in memory of one of our beloved physical education teachers. Thank you to all the volunteers and participants. Congratulations to Riziki Covington in earning a gold medal in Earth and Space Science at the National ACT-SO competition. We are really trying to focus more on decreasing cell phone usage at school with the motto, back in your pack. This transition has been made easier with Chromebook availability. Our school ACT average is at an all-time high at 26.1. This year is the 25th anniversary of the Naperville Nitra Sisters Cities Bond. Since we took a choir trip to Nitra, Slovakia in 2016, we have had a connection with the city, and to take that connection further, we have 35 students, their principal, and English teacher coming here October 5th to October 15th, and we will travel with the same size group in June 2018. Thank you for your time, and I'm very excited to work with you for this upcoming school year.
Wow, that was good. Good job.
Caitlin, great job. And I love that you have your Chromebook with you.
We got another minute, Mike. Should we do something else now?
No.
You just have to announce it if you're opening it. Though I think you need a motion to close it.
Okay. I'll have a motion to do.
I mean, at the end, you do. Nobody has a public comment on it, right?
No.
Reread mine, that didn't come on.
You can just look at Jay and Lewis in a minute.
That's enough.
So last time we'll catch him smiling.
Yeah.
Need some background music.
Time is now 7:05, and I call to order the budget hearing. Mr. Strang, can you lead us?
Thank you, board members. It's good to be here this evening. It seems like we started this process months ago, and it's been a roller coaster ride, bringing this budget together with all of the changes that are going on with the state of Illinois.
Talk into the mic, please.
Is that better? Dr. Lee is here with me as a part of his internship, and will be presenting part of the budget presentation with me. He's done a fabulous job working alongside me on a number of items in the business office, and I promise to politely correct him if he's wrong in any areas. Tonight, we're going to talk about the fiscal year 2018 operating budget. I think it's important to share some of our district numbers as it relates to our comparable districts, some of our neighboring districts, and DuPage County. We'll talk about the operating funds overview, take a little deeper dive into that. Our non-operating funds. Tonight you'll also hear from Mr. Lewis from PMA, who will be talking to you about an opportunity for a bond refunding, which will save the taxpayers several millions of dollars, and the next steps. And our next steps tonight will be the board will have to take action on this budget. We put it on display for 30 days since the board approved the tentative budget, and we'll be submitting those to the regional offices of education and the Illinois State Board of Education. And then, as you know, there's a new funding formula which will impact our budget, and we'll probably come back in November and December with an amended budget and ask the board for another approval once we find out what happens from the state of Illinois. Our 2018 budget for our operating funds includes a $321,754,080 in total revenue. Our expenditures are $325,139,930. We are looking at a situation this year where we will be deficit spending a little bit, but that's by the board's direction, and depending upon what happens with the evidence-based funding model, all of this will change. We've got a 29.9% fund balance to revenue ratio, and that's been holding pretty steady over the years. We've maintained about 29, 30, or 31% of those. In the future slides, you'll see us talk about the different areas of the accounts, of the salaries, the benefits, the purchase services, the supplies and materials. And you'll get a look at why we perform well and some of the things that happen in our district that help our performance as a school district financially in relationship to maybe some of our comp districts.
So there's three funding sources for school districts, local, state, and federal. As you can see, the majority of our revenue in this slide comes from local sources. Local has always been the most reliable. Almost 85% for our district revenue comes from local sources. Most of this is made up from property taxes, with the remaining from fees, tuition payments, and interest. Just over 12% comes from the state and includes unrestricted state revenues like general state aid, and then also restricted grants, which are categorical grants, which support special education, transportation. This chart also shows our comparable districts, which are asterisked up there. East and West Aurora school districts are also included as neighboring districts, along with Westmont and Lisle that you'll see as other DuPage County districts. There's currently still discussion in Springfield about a property tax freeze that would impact our levy. The amount we levy comes from the 85% of revenue we receive from local sources. With the upcoming fall veto session, we hope nothing occurs. The 12% that is illustrated in this chart that we receive from the state will also be the basis where funds will come from the new evidence-based funding model. And then this chart also shows East and West Aurora are more dependent not just on federal dollars, but also on state dollars as it relates to us and our comparable districts.
When you look at our comparable districts, which are Wheaton, Batavia, Naperville, Elmhurst, Barrington, St. Charles, and Geneva, we are, of those comparable districts, the most dependent upon state dollars, and that's why the talks in Springfield probably pique our interest more than they would in Naperville 203, where they don't receive as much from the state of Illinois.
On this next slide, it shows our total EAV per student. If we take the total property value within our district, which is our equalized assessed valuation, or equalized assessed value, and divide that number per student, this chart shows us the total EAV per pupil. You can see from this chart that our EAV per pupil is also lower than the state average. Our EAV is also the lowest among all of our comparable districts, as you see in this chart. Within our local property wealth, we are heavily residential. As we are all aware, with residential properties comes more kids. So our EAV per pupil, if you ask the question, how would we increase it with additional property wealth, without additional kids? Well, one example would be if we were to look at a company like Amazon, if they were to come in, or Apple, and open up, let's say, a distribution center within our district, that location would raise the total EAV without the additional number of students that a residential property might bring into our district.
Can we ask questions?
Certainly.
Why is the EAV per pupil important?
The EAV per pupil is important because that is the dollar amount that drives how much money you're going to levy. So if you're Lyle, for example, and you have $398,000 per pupil to levy against, that 1.5, 1.7, 2% CPI increase is drawing from that dollar amount to serve one student. In our case, with $171,000, when we draw that levy, we got to serve more students with that dollar amount. We are heavily residential and becoming denser with students. Another area that shows how you perform as a school district is your operating expenditures per pupil. I've talked to the Board of Education about this in the past. The operating expenditures per pupil is the annual operating budget that's approved by the Board of Education, and that's what we're working through tonight. This does not include our bond and interest expenses. This is just what it takes on an annual basis to educate our students. These are the audited numbers from fiscal year 16 for each of the school districts. And you can see that we spend $11,467 per student to educate our kids. That is a very low number. It's almost 25% lower than the DuPage County Unit District average. It's lowest of all 13 districts, including East Aurora and West Aurora. And you can see that some of our other districts are comparables, like Barrington spends $16,101, Westmont spends $18,698, Lisle spends $19,285 per student to run their district annually. As we go into the future slides, you'll see some reasons for why Indian Prairie School District is able to operate so efficiently.
So if I recall, the highest in the state per spending on a student was about $32,000 in one of the districts in the state, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So in this slide, we're actually able to see, it highlights the number of administrators a school district has as compared to the actual number of students. As you'll see here, our district actually has the fewest number of administrators per student, as illustrated in this chart, with a high ratio of 327.2. We also have the fewest number of administrators to our comparables and compared to the DuPage County average, along with the state average. As Jay said in the previous slide, one of the ways in which our operating expenses actually stay so low is because we actually have fewer staff and we operate with this lowest administrator ratio.
What's important to point out as well is that I received this information from the IIRC out of Northern Illinois University. It's the Illinois Interactive Report Card. You can go online and call up any school district to get this data. Every other year, I bother them and ask them to dump all of the districts from the state into an Excel and send it to me. The last time I did this, which was 2 years ago, we had the 12th highest student ratio to administrator in the state of Illinois. The 11 school districts that beat us were Central Illinois and Downstate Illinois school districts, where it was 1 or 2 schools and 1 or 2 administrators running the building.
The reason why we keep looking at per pupil on all these different variables is because we're trying to have a measure where we can compare ourselves to other districts that might be vastly different than ours.
That's
Downstate,
exactly
upstate, property wealth. We're trying to get some common denominator so that we can range ourselves on where we're at.
That's exactly right.
And I want to say too, I know when we showed this a couple of years ago, it took a while because we're used to seeing this, but when somebody sees this high number of 327, and you're saying, we're the lowest, that doesn't sometimes make sense. So just to reiterate, it's 327 administrators to why don't you explain it, please? Because I don't want to mess it up.
Every administrator in Indian Prairie School District carries 327 students
That's
as a
it.
load. The DuPage County School District average is 169. If you're at Westmont, they've got more administrators, so every administrator is carrying a load of 109. So you might go to a district like Lyle and find that they have a business department the size of my business department, and they're running a budget that's much smaller than Indian Prairie's budget.
Mm-hmm.
That make sense?
Well, it makes sense to me. I just, like I said, that was an area of, a point that was made a few years ago when we had those charts, and it took a while to explain that before, because you're used to, if it's a high number, it's like, oh, we're number one. Well,
Right, exactly.
this is kind of the opposite.
Right.
Bad number.
We,
Right.
we frequently hear there's too many administrators, and
Yes,
this is telling you
this
that
tells you it's
we
not.
perform better than
I just wanted to point that out, because I know
89% of the
that's,
districts in the state.
there may be some people just tuning in for, because of everything that's been going on with the state, so I wanted to make sure we reiterated that.
And one of the things, I'm not sure, maybe, I can't remember if we'll get to it later, but the number of students that we have, one of the reasons is because of the vast number of students that we have compared to other districts as well. I mean, we have a large student population compared to others, and
We have a large student population, but if you used our average for DuPage County of 169, and we wanted to say that we were going to carry the same load, we would be adding a great number of administrators.
that's kind of what.
At an expense.
This next slide actually highlights the exact same concept that we've been talking about, except now it relates to our licensed staff. This slide, you can see we again have the fewest number of licensed staff per student as compared to our comparables, DuPage County and the state average, and that's evidenced by the largest ratio that you see of 13.4. Our staff carry a heavier load here in 204 than other districts surrounding us and throughout the state.
So if I go back to the operating expenditure per pupil and having the best operating expenditure per pupil, if 80% of your expenses are salaries and benefits, you do that by having less staff, both on the administrative and licensed side. Your salaries are a little leaner, and your benefits are a little different. And again, to take that concept of trying to normalize it by looking at it per student, if you look at the cost for our healthcare budget per student compared to the districts that we've got up here, and some of the districts did not submit to the survey, you can see that we spend $1,010 per student annually on our health insurance. Elmhurst spends $1,897, 203, $1,883, Batavia, $1,562. The way that we've been able to keep our benefits in order is that we've instituted district-wide wellness screening. We've got a high deductible health plan now that we're encouraging staff members to join. Any new hire joins is automatically enrolled in the high deductible health plan. We went through a spousal surcharge so that if your spouse can get insurance through their employer but would like to be on ours, we charge a fee. Our administrators are covered at the same rate as the teachers with an 83-17 split. That is different from all of our comparables. We instituted teledoc online care, which is an opportunity for staff to call in to get a prescription if they have a sinus infection or pink eye rather than spending money going to the doctor. We instituted flu shots, orthodontist chiropractic utilization analysis, and we did a dependent audit of our school district to make sure that all the folks who were on our plan belonged on our plan. We have a very active and successful insurance committee that continually meets monthly to analyze and look at ways that we can save money for the school district and provide a great plan for our staff members.
Doesn't, Doje, doesn't also the fact that we have less staff play into that? Less staff and less administrators?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We added staff members, we would be adding, or administrators, we'd be adding to the plan.
Is this affecting our ability to meet board goal of retaining and quality teachers? Are we losing teachers to other districts because of benefits?
I'll let
Things
Mr.
like that?
Carius speak to it. He's up later in the agenda, but I can tell you that he's talked to me in the past about having a difficult time hiring folks to the district, particularly at the administrative level, competing with some of the districts around us. I couldn't tell you if we're losing, he didn't share that.
Jay, as a norm, do you know what that difference in administrator, or have an idea of what that difference in administrative percentage is for other districts on average?
As far as the split,
Mhm.
two of our comparable districts are 90-10, and then the rest are 100% board paid. So when you delve into the operating fund with a little bit more focus, you can see education fund is our largest fund. That's the one that funds the day-to-day operations of the schools and the salary of our licensed staff members. That is 82.4% of our budget. Operations and maintenance is 9.4%. Almost half of, maybe 40% of Todd's budget is for Aramark's custodial maintenance contract. We got our transportation budget, IMRF and Social Security, which is exactly what that is. We levy directly for that. And then working cash is a very small sliver of our budget, as well as tort. IRMRF, working cash, and tort are so small that I didn't want to go into detail with those tonight, but I do want to show a little more specifics about education, operations, and maintenance, and transportation.
What is transportation, Jay? Because that doesn't add up to 100% up there.
Yeah, you know what, my text box is too small. In the education fund is the one fund where we use all of our revenue sources. We use our local sources, our state sources, and our federal sources. Our local sources are the vast majority of it, and as Dr. Lee said, that has been our most consistent and reliable funding source. On the expenditure side, you can see that salaries represent almost 75% of our expenditures, and benefits 13.13. So if you're want to stay within an operating expense that makes sense and have a balanced budget, you really got to focus on your largest expenditures, which are salaries and benefits. Purchase services is 4.3%, supplies and materials 2.1%, capital outlay and other objects. To give you a sense of what our salaries include, it's regular teacher salaries and administrator salaries, stipends and substitute salaries. Employee benefits are medical insurance, life insurance, dental, Social Security. Purchase services are professional services, the audit, building rentals, printing, binding, communications. Supplies and materials are textbooks, library books, periodicals, and software. Capital outlay is land and building improvements. Other objects are interest, dues, and fees. And our non-capital equipment is any purchase that's less than $5,000. So that's kind of how those are broken out. So as an administrative team, we focus on all of those, and we try and move the money so that we're putting the resources as close to the students as possible.
Going back to slide 10, the reason why we operate with these funds is because the state mandates that we do. We have these different buckets that all these things need to go into so that, once again, we can compare what budgets are at different places, saying that this is supposed to be for education, this is supposed to be for this. Because in the general sector, looking at funds like this doesn't make much sense, but this is part of Illinois school code mandate to structure the budget like this.
That's exactly right. The school code also, up until the evidence-based funding model, limited how much money we could put into each of the funds, which kind of tied your hands. I mean, you can only levy a certain amount of money into each of the funds. Education fund is one of those where it was $4 for every $100,000 of assessed valuation. So when we reached that $4 mark, I couldn't levy any more money into it. And as you know, as board members who've been on the board for a while, in May, we would loan some money from operations and maintenance and transportation to the education fund to get that done. So it's,
And what does it mean you can't levy any more money into that?
what it means is that the state of Illinois caps how much money you can put into that. So I have to be very strategic in putting the money into the funds so that we get as much as we can into the district, but need to try and get it into the funds where we have the greatest expenditures. If education is one of our greatest expenditures, and we can't levy all of it into it, if I couldn't loan the money between funds, we wouldn't be able to pay our salaries, for example. Operations and Maintenance Fund is another very large fund of ours. You can see that purchase services is 51%, and that is our capital or Airmark custodial and maintenance contract, which is up this year, and we will be coming to the Board of Education sometime in the late winter with a bid to have those services provided. We outsource that service, and it has been very cost-effective and efficient for us. Supplies and materials is 24%, capital outlay 21%, other objects 0.3, salaries 2.8, and benefits, again, a fraction of a percentage. The capital outlay budget is something I'd like to focus in on a second. This year we've got $6 million budgeted into that. 1.7 million of that has already been expended to pay off fiscal year 17 construction that occurred. As you know from earlier discussions, we've moved money into Fund 60, which is not a part of the operating budget, so that we can expend those funds over the course of multiple years. If we keep it in Fund 20 and a construction project, a roofing project, a masonry project doesn't get completed prior to June 30th and it goes into July 15, it comes out of the next year. So we've spent $1.7 million on projects that we started last year and unfortunately finished after July 1st of this year. We've got $1 million of this that is allocated to continuing our air conditioning of our elementary schools. That is phase 4. In addition to that $1 million, there's $2 million left in Fund 60. So Todd is going to be using both of those funds to finalize phase 4, which will get 67% of our elementary classrooms air conditioned. This leaves $3.3 million remaining for capital projects throughout the district. That's roofs, that's asphalt, that's masonry projects, boilers. As you've heard from Todd in his presentations before, we have a criteria that deals with those items so that we prioritize them. If it's a health and life safety item, that's high on the priority. If it's a programming or curriculum need, that's high on a priority. If it's aesthetics, it's low on the priority. So you can walk into our schools and find some carpet that looks pretty thin or some ceiling tiles that look pretty rough. A number of years ago, we had EMG come in and do a full facility assessment. They were a company that was not associated with any construction companies. Their job was purely to look at facility infrastructures. They said that in fiscal year 18, we should be spending $13.6 million on capital projects, and we're going to be spending $3.3 million on capital projects. What does that mean? It means that we're going to defer projects further out, something we've been doing for a number of years. And at some point, the water heater is going to spring a leak, and we'll have to fix it in the middle of the night. So we're not staying on top of those projects.
So
Jay,
you haven't done comparables against other districts, but the time I've been on the board, I try to pay attention to the newspaper, and it appears that many of the districts spend more than we do for their capital outlay, and they have anywhere from a quarter to half the schools that need repair. Am I correct in that?
You are correct, Mr. Razak, and I could put together a comparison of our comps with our capital outlay to show that they do spend 2 and 3 times more on their projects to keep their buildings and their infrastructures in shape and have half the buildings.
Thank you.
Jay, as we look at what has been suggested for spending, and we're budgeting much less. We're ensuring, though, that that expenditure, that we're not putting any danger for any safety concerns in any of our buildings.
That is a great question. When we look at the needs, and we have consultants who evaluate our buildings and look at our buildings, we have a process every year where the administrators in the buildings have an opportunity to make requests for facility improvements. They have to categorize what it's for. We work with the superintendent's cabinet to see if that is a priority, whether it's a programming change or a curriculum need, like if we need to split a wall or change the configuration of a classroom because there's a student that now needs to get into that classroom and it wasn't accessible before. We have to make those changes. But we always look at the safety of our students first, and we look at the programming of our students second and the curriculum needs. I can tell you that we very rarely get to the point where we're doing any type of aesthetics, where it's a carpet or it's a painting, and if we do it internally, and we do maybe one wall instead of the entire classroom. We did run into a situation a couple of years ago when one of our elementary schools had one of its two boilers in the middle of January go out, and we were limping along for 2 weeks on one boiler, and we're making plans up here for if that one was to go out, how we would handle those students until we get that building back up to be heated.
Duct tape work.
One area in operations and maintenance that I'm going to ask the board to weigh in on a little bit is with Indian Plains High School. The board had a presentation on March 20th of 2017, and if we're going to do anything for next year, not this year, we need to have a consensus or an idea what the board would like to do with it. We set a deadline at that time to have an idea of October 1st, 2017, and since this is our last board meeting until that time, I thought I would bring this back up. We've got three options that we presented with the Board of Education. The first one is to repair the school for $1,526,000 and continue its current programming, which is Indian Plains High School and Phoenix Academy. There's roughly, at its high point, it's about 80 students in there, so the cost per student, if we were to do that, is $19,000. Option two would be to demolish the site for $650,000 and potentially sell that property. We've had it appraised, and you know what that is about. And then we would have to consider relocating those students to a different site if we were to do that. And option three is to repair the school and then convert it back to an elementary school for the cost of $1,925,900. And we believe we could house 250 elementary schools students there, so that would be $7,703 per student. We are considering, if we didn't put any money into it or very limited amount of money into it, could we prolong this decision for another year so that it times better with the community engagement that the board has requested, so that they can have some time to wrestle with this as a part of that process as well. And if that would be the case, we would not make the major repairs, but just the minor repairs, and keep the building as it is currently. So with that, I'd like some discussion with the board.
Nothing?
Well, I don't see option three as a realistic option from an elementary school building. I'm sorry?
Based on the demographics.
Right. Well, and based on where we currently stand with our elementary school population and percentage of use of buildings right now, so option three I don't see as a viable option.
I support option two. The building has a negative life expectancy.
Of 26 years, I think.
Right. So we're going to have to sink a lot of money into it now. We're going to have to sink more money into it on an ongoing basis. So I think from a efficient use of our resources, we need to look at one of the lower cost options for that building. And so I support option 2.
Others?
I support option 2 as well. My only concern with that is the relocation of these other students. I mean, I think, obviously, when we moved our STEP students into the high schools, you know, that created some challenges in terms of finding, you know, because we know some of those schools are, especially Mattia, is already crowded. So I'm concerned that, you know, where we would put these students. Now, again, according to the demographic study, we have some options maybe to move some things around. So I would want to know what else that consisted of, you know, and again, if the board agrees with option 2, then I'm sure we'll get that information. But, so at this time, for the same reason Justin mentioned, I support option 2, because even if we do option 1, repair it, there's going to be more repairs year after year after year. We don't need option 3 because of, you know, we don't need it as an elementary building. And even if we were to use that building, you said 225 students? 250?
250.
I mean, even if we were to use that building for, let's say, the STEPS program, because it would have its own building, which I'm hearing from parents is, you know, that's what they want. I still don't know that, again, it's the building itself is, I think we're still going to put money into, you know, sinking money into that as other repairs come up. It's just an old building. And if we can sell it, even better.
Mark, anything?
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards option 2, but I have the same concerns as Mrs. Price that, you know, it's not those credit recovery kids I'm concerned about at Indian Plains, it's the other population of students who, the reason they were so successful and have graduated from our district is because they got out of the situation they were in, being at the high school, because the anxiety issues, whatever the case may be. And I'm concerned about putting those same students back in high school. So, you know, I don't want to put the cart before the horse on one hand, so I'm sure there is a good solution we can come up with. But thinking fiscally responsibly for the district, and based on the demographic study we got at the last board meeting, and looking at what this building could potentially be a money pit, and it's way past its life expectancy, I don't know how we can continue to keep this building, as much as I love the history and the oldness of it, but it's just not fiscally prudent as a district. So I'm confident that administration will find some great options with those students, but to me, the maintaining the building and keeping it is just, I don't see that to be fiscally responsible.
Ms. Deming?
Well, I shared option 3, and I just, you know, when you look at option 1, the cost per student, that just fiscally doesn't make sense, especially to me. That's a concern. And looking at what the expenditure would be to repair that building, and I don't have the same history that's been presented to the board previously, but my understanding is that that building is just beyond, you know, the life expectancy that we need to continue to fund it. So I would lean towards option 2. I do have a concern of wanting to hear and try to understand what that population, you know, from parents and students regarding, you know, how we relocate them and where we place. So that's a concern to try and make a decision on where they would go.
Ms. Donahue?
So I'm pretty consistent with everything that's been said. I think the demographics study showed us that we don't need more space. I am worried, and I expressed that in some of my written comments about the location of the STEP students and the kids that are in this building if we close it, and I'd like to understand more about that, but economically, yeah, it seems like it doesn't make sense to put more money into this super old building.
So I concur with that also. I will.
Yeah, come on.
Seriously?
Oh. I thought Kathy, sorry, Kathy.
All right.
Kathy.
I'm going to concur. This one is hard for me. I have a lot of feelings for Indian Plains. And I still do worry about the growth in the north. That the demographic study, it shows us coming down, but it's never really had that picture, and we keep fluctuating students around. But financially, you come to a time where you say there's just no way to continue this. But as everybody else has said, if we don't, we really have to look at it is more than just programming. It was that community of students and staff that gets these kids to the graduation marker, and somehow we got to be able to create that still, because it's that community feeling that does it. It's not a program. So I'll be curious and anxious to see what is presented for a solution.
I think you have consensus,
Thank you.
and I concur with it.
Come back with some recommendations.
The transportation fund, it is funded by both state sources and local sources. The state sources are our regular education and special education transportation grants. So that's money that we submit for and goes right for transportation. Again, purchase services is 51%. That is our contract with our bus companies, both special education, regular education, and out-of-district students. Supplies and materials are 24%, capital outlay 21%. Other objects and salaries and benefits are a fraction of the transportation costs. Capital outlay is building software, equipment for the GPC, which I think is the Geographic Positioning Center, connectivity. The supplies and materials are the minibus driver training. We have to train all of our bus drivers and pay for their physicals, and we have to pay for their certifications. The non-capital equipment is the GPSs and the driver fobs for logging in. We are in year 3 of a 5-year contract, and the terms of the contract call that in year 4 we have to negotiate year 4 and year 5, or we can go out to bid. We've been polling some of our districts that we work with, and we are seeing 22% increases. Part of that is because there's a nationwide bus driver shortage. The economy has turned around. Folks no longer are looking for jobs as bus drivers. They're looking for jobs as truck drivers or as mechanics or in other areas. And so we're losing drivers and struggling to find them, just like everyone across the country. And I think we shared some articles with the Board of Education on that. And our pay for bus drivers went from $15 a year ago to $18 just so we could attract drivers here in our district. But it's something that everyone is wrestling with, and so I expect as we go through this negotiation, it's going to be a difficult negotiation to come to. In the transportation fund, you can see some of our comparable districts and how we operate. We again are a very efficient school district. We are operating at $4.71 per mile. Our Per mile reimbursement is 99 cents, I believe I can see, 93 cents, which is in the average, and it's better than the average of the districts in the group. Part of the struggle with transporting students is kind of the traffic patterns of your community. If you've been in this district or in this community for a long time, you know that getting from one side of town to the other is much more difficult than it was 29 years ago when I started. I could make it to Gregory in 5 minutes. Now it takes me 45 minutes. So that's part of the struggle, but we've operate a tiered system. So we try and run a bus to one school and then have it run directly to a middle school and then a high school route. And by running the tiered routes, we save money by tearing them up into 3s and 2 routes, and we try not to run singles. And we run our buses very efficiently.
Hey, Jake, can I ask a quick question here?
Yes.
The black vertical lines that are between the blue bars, I'm assuming that's how much we are reimbursed back from the state?
That's right.
Why do certain districts get reimbursed so much more from the state? Because I'm looking at, you know, Aurora, East and West Aurora, I guess I can understand because they are more reliant upon state dollars, but I'm looking at Barrington here, and I'm seeing their reimbursement rate, and I'm like, what the hey?
Yeah, there's a number of factors that play into the reimbursement. The number of hazards that you have to add buses for, the number of students with special circumstances that you have to add buses for, how far those miles are that students ride on those buses. So it's a really elaborate formula, and I can get you more details into it. But if I went into the details now, I'd probably make some mistakes.
Is there still a state statute of the distance students are away from a school that we have to provide transportation for?
Exactly.
So
Mile and a half.
mile and a half, we have to, okay.
And then if students are within that, and I'll give you a great example, is a lot of the construction that's going on around Peterson Elementary School. And we do hazard studies. In the beginning of the year, we probably do 2 or 3 hazard studies a week. If the sidewalks aren't complete and a student has to walk through, you know, an area where there's houses under construction that gets 3 houses of sidewalks in an area that's under construction, well, that's what can be considered part of a hazard. So then you have to look at, okay, that's one. How far is the student from school, and how many streets does he have to cross or she have to cross that's a major intersection? That could be another part of that hazard. So we could still bus students within that if there's a hazard. If they've got to cross a railroad track, for example, we'll bus students if they have to do that. If they have to cross Ogden or Route 59, those would be hazards. So we would bus within that mileage under those conditions. The fiscal year 2018 budget, non-operating funds, this is exactly as what we've presented to the board in the past. We've got our debt services, our capital projects. You can see Todd's expenditures of $2 million, which he's going to complete the air conditioning with, and our total expenditures of $29,186,552. This does not include the potential bond refunding, which you'll hear about tonight and hopefully take action on in October. So this will change. In this also is the opportunity to pay off our 2 debt certificates. We are in the position, as I've said before, of collecting enough money from developers both in Aurora and in Naperville, as well as the sale of our 11 acres by Country Lakes and the 25 acres over by the Brock Brody farm, that we'll be in a position to pay out of our debt certificates, and we'll be talking to the board about that. And I know that Mr. Lewis in his presentation tonight will talk about that a little bit as well. I want to highlight to the board, because you've been involved in a number of these bond refundings. We've been refunding bonds for a number of years, and we are at an AA1 rating. That's the second highest rating and a really strong rating for school districts. They said, you know, we get that rating because we're a large and diverse tax base. We've got a sound, stable financial operations that support a healthy reserve, and believe it or not, a moderate debt burden. We've got about 10 years of $28 million a year in paying off our debt. And that is something that, the future administration is really going to enjoy. When that is done. But we have refunded bonds for savings, and we have not extended those bonds. We've just refunded them for savings and taken care of the economic climate in 2015 for $9 million in taxpayer savings, in 2016 for $799 of taxpayer savings, last year in 2017 for $5.2 million in savings. And if we refund these bonds that you'll hear about tonight, it could be as much as another $10 million in savings. So in 4 years, that's $25 million in savings to our taxpayers. That is not money that the district gets to spend. That's just money that I don't have to levy for to pay off our bonds. Finally, later in tonight's agenda, we'll ask the board to approve the budget. And as I've said before, once you do that, we'll send those to the Illinois State Board of Education and the Regional Office of Education and the counties of Will and DuPage. And then once the evidence-based funding model comes out, I understand that they're going to have some numbers in early November. We'll start building a new tentative budget and making some presentations to the board about what that means. The auditors are in the district finalizing fiscal year 2017, and if you remember, we expected about a $2.5 million deficit. We're coming in pretty close to that mark. We're going to be pretty well on what we expected. Believe it or not, we're going to start building the forecast for fiscal year 2019. So we're going to be working on 1 year, finalizing last year, and starting to build the next year. With that, we'll take any more questions from the board.
I just have a couple.
Go ahead.
I just have a couple really quick, easy questions for you. Since my time on the board, 2011, correct me if I'm wrong, has the state paid us 100% of what they owe us in the last 6 years because they've either reduced the funding, prorated the funding, or missed a payment? Have they paid us 100% in any of those last 6 years?
No, sir.
Okay.
They've either prorated our general state aid or prorated our categoricals or skipped a categorical altogether.
In the last 6 years, or since at least 2011, 2010, our levy, which we can levy for new revenue, which we have to state as CPI, that has only been above 2%, I think, twice. Last year, I think it was at just above 2%, and then maybe back in 2012, I think it was about 3%. But other than that, it's either been 1% or lower, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's CPI has been historically low. 2.1% would be this upcoming December's levy amount.
Okay.
Last year was 1.7, and I believe the year before that was 1.8. They've been very low.
Since, even before my time on board, since 2009, I know the Board of Education in our district has essentially called themselves, and we don't like to use the word anymore, but austere times, where we've tried to put more austerity into place to reduce our expenses. Do you know roughly, since 2009, roughly how much you believe the district has cut their expenses, if you had to put a ballpark on it?
These are the easy questions?
Well, I'm just trying.
And he had two. Got three.
Over $41 million.
Okay. And then, well, my last question. This is the, yes or no, I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first year in the history of the district, other than 2 years ago when we borrowed for technology from our fund balance. This is the first year that our district will have a deficit because of all the reductions in expenses that we've tried to put in place, correct?
The board has been constructive in trying to run a balanced budget, and the times that we haven't, it was because the board decided to go into fund balances to upgrade our technology or upgrade the safety of our schools or to complete projects in the district that you felt were essential because we've neglected them.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Okay, it should be noted that no one signed in for public comment in terms of the budget. With that, I need a motion to close the hearing.
I move to close the budget hearing.
And I have a motion and a second. Jackie, can you call the roll to close this?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Deming?
Aye.
Mr. Rising?
Aye.
Mr. Rasak?
Aye.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Carubus?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know what time the students are supposed to stay to. Generally, they start leaving at around 8. This would be a good time to leave. We can give you a 4-minute time frame to do that.
That was the best part of the meeting, too. You guys are lucky.
Such an exciting part.
That's the first time I remember that students have ever seen the budget. I can remember.
Oh, because they had to, when we did last year, they had to have been here. Go back and tell all your friends how school budget is planned, how it works. You guys are in the know.
And they're excited.
I can tell. They can't wait to get out there and tell their friends.
$0.99 a mile.
Gotta admit, we're a fun group.
Okay, it's now public comment time. We have public comment both for non-agenda and agenda items. It's now time for public comment for non-agenda items. If you are here to speak to an agenda item, that comment will be taken immediately prior to that item. 30 minutes is allowed for public comment, and each person is limited to 3 minutes. When addressing the board, we ask that you respect the confidentiality and safety of our students and school district personnel. We also ask that those addressing the board be cognizant that this is an open meeting and is available to all age groups, and as such, ask that you consider who the audience members are this evening and keep comments age appropriate. Public comment represents the voice and the opinion of the speaker. There will be no feedback from the board members during the meeting, but follow-up will be provided by an administrator as appropriate. So again, for those with non-agenda items, we are going to start out with Cheryl Johnson.
Hi, my daughter Maura is a student, at the STEPS program. This will be her 3rd year at the STEPS program. I just wanted to go back a little bit and talk about when she was in preschool. We lived in Plainfield District 202, and they only had a segregated preschool. And I was called because she would constantly take her chair out of the school classroom and sit in the hallway. So I came to observe, and I come to realize this is not the right emotional place for her, not the right social place for her, not the right academic placement for her. So we gave written notice to Plainfield District 202, filed suit, pulled Maura from that school, and moved her into Naperville into a private pay preschool. Through the negotiations and deciding to settle with the school district, the Bonnie Macbeth Center was built in Plainfield, so we were very pleased about that they modeled their preschool off of our Prairie Children Preschool here in 204. So we're very happy that we're in a district now that has set precedent. So when we were in the middle of that lawsuit, we also broke ground in a home here in Naperville because we wanted to be into an inclusive district. So we had a great experience with her at elementary level. We had an okay experience with her at middle school. When it was time for high school, she started to stress a little bit about that change and the difference in environment in a bigger school. to the point where she would have balding spots in the back of her hair from the stress of it, where she would literally have her hair falling out. We got to Neuqua and had a fantastic experience. She thrived, she grew socially, emotionally, psychologically. She did a really great job, and academically the school got her back up to the reading level she was at, and she performed. She was actively involved with the cheer team and everything. When it was time to move to STEP, she was worried. Again, the stress started to happen. So what I did is I put her into the COD vocational program at STEPS for a 6-week program. She did a great job with that, and then we moved back to STEPS as full-time to finish that first semester. 3 weeks into that, I've come to realize she started to have massive abdominal pain, started to stop eating, and 5 weeks later lost 13 pounds and was almost non-functional from the stress of being in that type of environment. We ruled out everything medically. I put her through massive amounts of procedures and testing. I'm in the medical field myself as a nurse. And Christmas came, and she was able to be home and not have steps into her life. And she started to eat again, started to gain weight, and started to be back to her perky self. The first day back, massive abdominal pain, 1 hour being back at the STEPS program. I picked her up. The rest of that semester, we pretty much, maybe an hour or two, she could tolerate being into the STEPS program. But the staff at that point worked really well with us, making sure that the solution for her to be an appropriate placement was her to be pulled out of that STEPS building as much as possible and be more in the community. So that second year at STEPS, we did the same model, and it worked very efficiently for her. This year is her 3rd year there. She'll be 21 in October. And the model we're using right now, because she doesn't want to go to Avanzi because that's where she got placed. I was told because Neuqua doesn't have enough staff for her to be placed at Neuqua. Therefore, she's at Avanzi. She said she's not going to go there. And I know I'm out of time.
Yeah, if you can do like 3 or 4 sentences, that would be great. I
Okay.
hate to do it, but it's my job.
I just had to get there. So my whole thing is with being here in Plainfield District 202, in Plainfield District 202 and setting precedent coming here, we wanted that same thought to come through for here. So right now I have her working 15 hours a week. She's out of the STEPS building as much as possible. She's been to school 3 days out of 17 because of the social. More emotional and psychological aspect of being part of that program is just very difficult for her, and I've had multiple meetings, I've had multiple agenda with the STEPS people, and I think you guys need to hear some more stories because you're missing that part of where you guys split the kids up into the programs. I think we need to try and set precedent moving forward and have the kids maybe not finish the day they turn 22. I know by law you guys don't have to educate them, but keep them for the semester so they have that transition so that there is an end point for them. Instead of you're done the day you turn 22, you no longer have to be educated by requirement by our district. So maybe
Hey,
set precedent doing that. I know I have to stop.
Thank
very
you,
much.
thank you. Thank you. Next speaker, Dan Leahy.
Good evening. My name is Dan Leahy. My son Tyler is a first-year student at STEPS and a proud graduate of Neuqua Valley High School. I'm here tonight to add another voice to the group that's pushing for positive change with regard to the current STEPS model. The solution of housing STEPS at 3 district high schools where they can no longer interact with the student population or culture of those institutions is not acceptable. I'm asking the board to step forward with true leadership in your role of governance to ensure a better future for our program. We have some positive developments as a result of the STEPS overhaul. Parents are really engaged. I've been so proud to see our community bond together and advocate for our students. We see committed and passionate staff. There's no doubt in my mind that the teachers and administrators really want what's best for our students. But what we need from the board is a true vision. This vision should be developed independent of the limitations on current resources. It should strive to be as inclusive as possible. The current program feels segregated and isolating. What was originally proposed as a 1-year solution now seems like it could continue. What's the plan for dialogue with parents as we quickly approach 2018? Population numbers for our group are outpacing the district's ability to house them. Where was the vision that led us to this point? Administrators are paid good salaries to anticipate and plan for what's coming. This obviously didn't happen in the case of STEPS. I ask those in the audience to continue to support us, the STEPS staff, and our children, as we ask the board and leadership team of 204 to drive a vision for the future, for a better future. Email the board, join our PTSA, and get involved. Thanks for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Seriously.
And Nancy Seabolt.
Good evening. What happened today? Why were STEPS parents not notified of the lockdown at the same time the rest of the Neuqua Valley parents were notified? Why did our email come after the situation was resolved? Why did we have to find out about it from Neuqua Valley parents in the news station? There was a helicopter flying over the area taking video. They were reporting that Neuqua Valley was on lockdown and there was an armed suspect in the area. What is the plan for those students that were just arriving at STEPS or returning from a job or a community outing? Today was a major safety issue. Parents were not notified in a timely manner. Neuqua Valley parents were notified around noon. STEPS parents were notified at 1:29. I trust you to keep our children safe and to have a plan. I feel that our children were put in an unsafe situation today. What is a district policy to keep students safe and communicating with parents during police soft lockdowns? What happened today was totally unacceptable. We are also hearing that there was a tornado drill at Wabansie Valley today. We have been told that STEP students were released early today because of the timing of the tornado drill. They did not participate in the drill due to the STEP's bus timing issues. Isn't it a disservice to the STEP students and the possible safety issue for them not to participate in a tornado drill? We know everyone has a lot on their plates. We know that everyone is doing their best. It has been incredibly hard to handle and plan for all of the situations, let alone the needs of 120 students with disabilities. The STEP staff has done a great job taking this bad situation and trying to make it best as it can. We are trying to stay positive, but it's hard to see things that are try to deal with them day after day. We can't say enough. We need to be together under one roof. Staff needs to be together so that all resources are in the same place. They are stretched so thin and need more support. We are in danger of losing some amazing staff. Students need to be together so they can have access to all the resources and their peers. We have 3 isolated islands. We need to be out of the high schools. We need to be a community again. It's not fair or right for anyone. How can we work together to find solutions? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The other speakers are for agenda items, so I will call that at that time. And it's now time to move to our consent agenda and superintendent report, and we begin with the superintendent report.
Okay, I have a short report tonight, I think. At the end of August, the Board of Education approved a charge for our upcoming community engagement work, with the culmination being a report provided to the board no later than July of 2018. We are just in the beginning stages of pulling together a facilitating team of parents and community members. The first meeting will be on Monday, next Monday night for that facilitating group. More information about the open community meetings will be coming soon via e-news and our website, and those meetings will begin in October. We really look forward to getting this process underway and look forward to hearing feedback from a broader base of our community. So we encourage all of you who are here and watching to join us when those meetings begin. And I want to take this opportunity to congratulate each of our veteran school board members. We were recently notified by the Illinois Association of School Boards that Justin Karubis, Kathy Peel, Mark Rising, Lori Price, and Mike Razak will receive an award in the Illinois Association of School Boards Master School Board Member Program. Mark Rising will also receive designation as a Leadership Fellow. So your achievement models of lifelong learning we want to see in our students and in our staff. And board members will receive this award at the DuPage Division Dinner on October 19th. So congratulations. And Lori and Susan, no pressure. You've joined a high-performing group. So we'll look forward to saying every name next year. And that's it.
Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda, and I need a motion that the Board of Education approve consent agenda items D through I.
I move that the board approve agenda consent items
D through I.
D through I.
Second?
Have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? With that, Jackie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Demme?
Aye.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Mr. Carubus?
Yes.
Mr. Reising?
Aye.
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Mr. Rasak?
Aye. With that, the motion passes. Move to the action items, which is the approval of the 2017-18 budget. Do I have a motion that the Board of Education approve the budget?
I move that the Board of Education approve the 2017-18 budget as presented.
Second.
Any other discussion for Mr. String? I didn't think so. Jackie, can you call the roll?
Ms. Price?
Aye.
Mr. Reising?
Aye.
Mr. Rasak?
Aye.
Ms. Donahue?
Aye.
Ms. Demme?
Aye.
Mr. Carubus?
Point of order, Mike. Was there any public comment on this agenda item?
No, and I mentioned that during the course of the hearing.
Okay. Yes.
Ms. Peel?
Aye.
Does the motion pass?
Yes, motion passed.
Just making sure.
Yes, we are now moving to our discussion component of our meeting, which is the bond refunding. Mr. Strang is with us again.
Good evening again, board members. It's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Lewis from PMA. His purpose here tonight is to just go through what a bond refunding looks like, what it means, what the process is, what the Board of Education's role is, and give you a highlight on this potential refunding that we'd like to bring to you in October. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Lewis.
Thank you for having me here tonight to go through this opportunity for the district. Before we look at the opportunity, I thought I'd take a moment just to give you an overview of where we stand now as it relates to the municipal bond market. If you were on the board when I presented previously, you've seen this chart before. This is an index of municipal bond interest rates. It's like the Dow Jones Industrials for the stock market. And this data goes back to 2013. And you can see quite a bit of variation in the chart. Most recently, if you focus on the blue line, that represents the one-year rate, and it's been going up. If you follow the Federal Reserve at all, you know that why that one-year rate's been going up is because the Federal Reserve is rates the Fed funds rate. And then the other rates, the 5, the 10, the 15, 20, and 20-year rates had a pretty precipitous rise right around November of 16, and that was due to the presidential election and the results that surprised the markets. And there was some concern about changes that could occur from a policy standpoint to tax-exempt bonds that could cause a rise in rates. A lot of those concerns have been alleviated since the election, so you've seen rates come back down to not as low as they were prior to the election, but they've come down quite substantially here over the last several months. Your refunding opportunity is for bonds that would be paid off in about 7 to 8 years. So the line that really is indicative of close to where you would borrow would be the 5-year rate. It would be slightly above that just because this is a AAA rated index. You're slightly below AAA. And the other drawback is you are located in the state of Illinois. And several investors have determined to not buy bonds from the state of Illinois, not just the state, but its local entities. So you pay what's called the Illinois premium. Now, your penalty from the market's not as great as it is for lower rated entities or for bonds that go out further than the tenor of your financing.
So Illinois is getting penalized by the feds because we're Illinois, okay, yeah.
Or from bond investors, yeah.
Yeah.
There was a presentation to the General Assembly a few months ago where one, I think it was Nuveen, or if it wasn't Nuveen, it was a company like that testified to General Assembly that the cost taxpayers, I think on average, just under $1 billion per year of additional interest cost on local borrowings. So. This slide is a summary of all of your outstanding principal by series, which accumulates across to become your aggregate principal. Jay had mentioned earlier you levy about $29–30 million per year on your bonds. Well, these are the principal payments that make up that levy. I've highlighted in yellow the 2 series that we'll discuss tonight as it relates to the potential refunding opportunity for your taxpayers, which we'll talk about right now. So the 2007B bonds, the original purpose of those bonds was to refinance prior bond series. So you're refinancing a prior refunding bond. There's approximately $59 million that is callable on December 30th, 2017. So what that means is there's a difference between municipal bonds and home mortgages. Probably everybody in this room who owns a home has refinanced their home to a lower interest rate at some point. There's no time frame that you have to wait for before you can refinance your home. You can refinance it whenever you think it makes sense for you. Municipal bonds for a period of time cannot be refinanced until you get to the call date. And there's ways to do what's called an advance refunding, but that option was not available for these bonds. So you have to wait to get within 90 days of that call date. So you're almost going to be in that situation like you are with the home mortgage. You're paying off the old bonds, issuing new bonds to pay off the old bonds almost simultaneously. The average interest rate in these bonds is 4.75%. So if you think back to that chart I just presented to you, you can see that rate is significantly above the current market. The 2009A bonds are a smaller bond series, about $5.4 million, also callable on 12/30 of 17. And the rate on that refinancing is lower at 4%, but it makes sense to do this at the same time you do the larger financing so you can economize on the financing costs. This slide is a graphical representation, or not graphical, it's a table of the savings, the estimated savings at this time. Jay had put up a summary of the savings by your refunding bonds over the last 4 fiscal years. It included a $10 million estimate. That would refer to the present value of the refunding. So you can see right now, based off the market conditions of September 7th, plus we added a little bit of cushion for market movement, about 0.2%. The estimated PV savings is about $10.6 million. The actual reduction in the levy would be the sum of that yellow column, about $12 million. But because that reduction is over time, you really have to analyze it on what the present value of that amount is, which is $10.6 million, which is a substantial number of savings. And as Jay had said earlier, the savings accrues back to your taxpayers in the form of a reduced levy.
So given your comments earlier about the punishment we get for being in Illinois, does this reflect having that punishment also?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions on the refunding? Otherwise, I was going to change gears here for a moment and talk about the debt certificates. But, yeah, I do want to make one other comment. If the board chooses to proceed with the refunding, like you've done previously, you'd approve a resolution at your next board meeting authorizing the issuance of the refunding bonds.
Just to clarify, this savings that you're showing on this page is a reflection of the 2007A, 2008B, and the 2009A series bonds, correct?
That's correct, just those 2 series.
But we can only the 2007 and 8 are callable this December, correct?
The 2007B and the 2009A. I'm sorry, that's what's reflected here. There's just 2 series of bonds.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Yes. Any other questions?
Couple questions on the refunding. You say there's a savings to the taxpayers. That means, in effect, that if you look on slide 8, I think it is. Yeah. 2018, there's approximately $800,000 savings. That's not a savings that the district can use to expend to upkeep Indian Plains, right?
No, it is not.
So the savings to the taxpayer is that it, in effect, reduces the levy, which would potentially reduce the tax rate, depending on other dynamics into play. Is there a way to refund these and change the term? So it looks like when we refund, do we pay the whole thing off?
Yeah, you're paying off all the outstanding bonds, and this is a term-for-term refunding. So you're not extending the term at all. The current bonds mature in 2026, and the way this is proposed is that the new bonds would also mature in 2026.
And is there a way to refund and extend the term?
Yes, you could extend the term. There's nothing in the school code that prohibit you from extending the term. There is a federal law that gets involved because you can't extend it out too far beyond what the life of the assets were that originally financed.
How long do you, before a bond is callable typically, like these bonds? Like how many years was it?
It's typically 8 to 10 years later.
Okay.
2007.
I have no other questions.
Okay. So the next section is on the debt certificates that you have outstanding. You have two series of debt certificates. Now, debt certificates are different than general obligation bonds. The general obligation bonds are paid from a separate tax levy that can only be used to pay those bonds and cannot be used for anything else. The debt certificate also have principal and interest payments, but they're payable from your operating funds. So it's paid from the same pot of money that you use for operations and maintenance or any other sort of operating expenses is available to pay the debt service on these obligations. The 2010 certificates were issued to reimburse project costs associated with the construction of the high school. Now these are issued as, you'll see BABs in the parenthetical. BAB stands for Build America Bonds. Build America Bonds were a special program created as part of the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, in which you get a tax credit equal to 35% of the interest costs on those bonds. 4.1 million of those certificates are callable on 12/30/17. The average interest rate on the certificate is 4.6%. Net of the BAB credits, 3.1% is what you're paying as a net interest rate. The 2009 certificates were issued to refund other certificates. Actually, that should be the 2014 A certificates. I apologize. The 4 million of the 2014 A certificates are callable in 12/30/17. So the 14A paid off the 09 certificates. The average interest rate on these is 2%. So it's not a very high interest rate. This schedule shows you the actual payback of the certificates. So there's no principal that's amortized. These are both set up as what we call a bullet maturity. You pay them at one point in time. So annually you're making interest payments on these certificates. On the 2010 Build America bonds, or Build America certificates, you pay a net interest of about $62,000 every 6 months. And on the 14A certificates, you pay net interest of about $50,000 every 6 months. Now, what are your options as it relates to these call dates? As Jay had mentioned earlier, the district anticipates we'll have funds on hand to redeem these certificates, and I believe those funds are from the developer fees.
Developer fees and the sale of property.
So if you redeem the debt certificates, what would that do? That would eliminate the associated net interest payments on those certificates and would take care of those bullets. At some point, you got to do something with those bullets. You can't just keep paying interest in their perpetuity. However, if you use those funds on hand to pay off the bullets, you give up the potential to earn interest on those funds on hand. So you can't just look at, well, we're eliminating the interest expense, so it's all gain. Well, you also have an opportunity cost. You're not able to invest those funds anymore from the developer fees and from the sale of land. So what is that opportunity cost? Well, it depends on the interest rate expectations and length or duration of the investments. If those funds are going to be in a short duration investment, well, you're not earning as much as if you were to take those funds and put them in a longer duration investment. So, but if you were to retain the funds and not pay them off, your district could still choose to redeem the certificates and eliminate the current bullet maturities. So, because as I mentioned, you have to pay them off at some point. So if you determine not to pay them off with the funds that you've accumulated, you would likely need to either refinance those bullets to a payment that you could afford annually to pay out of the operating funds. So eventually you're going to be paying them off out of the operating funds. There's no other way to pay these from some other source that doesn't impact the operating funds. Any questions on the debt certificates?
So you talk about it as a bullet maturity. Flip that onto a home mortgage. That's like a balloon payment, right?
Yes.
So the whole mortgage comes due on a fixed date. And what you're, on that last item on page 12, is you're saying maybe let's structure it so it's not just interest, it's principal and interest only over time instead of interest, principal.
Yeah, and I wasn't involved with the original sale of those, but I think the anticipation is to not pay them off immediately and allow the district to accumulate the funds to eventually pay them off. So I think that was the original plan to do that. That's why they were set up as bullet maturities. But you do have the option to consider something else, which would be to amortize them and pay down principal each year. But you would have to identify a source in your operating funds in order to do that. So if you wanted to maintain that liquidity for whatever reason, you would need to find a source in your operating budget to pay the debt certificates, which, as Jay alluded to earlier, right now you're looking for sources just to address your capital needs. So it may behoove you to pay them off.
Any other questions? Jay, what do you need from us?
I think at this point, Mr. Razak, we will be coming back in October with the parameters resolution. Mr. Lewis, would you mind telling them what that looks like so the new board members have an idea what to look for?
Sure. So a parameters resolution sets forth, as the name suggests, certain parameters that have to be met in order for the bond sale to proceed. This would just be for the refunding bonds, should the board choose to move forward. And the main parameter in those is a minimum savings target that you would like to achieve. Also in that parameters resolution is a maximum term. So right now the parameter would be to not go out further than the bonds that are currently outstanding. And then the board also names in that parameters resolution delegates to approve the bond sale. And those delegates typically are the board president and Jay, as the two individuals that have the responsibility to approve the sale. Now, a different alternative than to have a parameters resolution is to actually bring the sale terms to you, but that requires us to sell the bonds on the day that you're having the board meeting, which isn't always the best strategy to do, is to target your bond sale to time to a board meeting. So that's why you do the parameters resolution, to provide that flexibility. The redemption of the certificates, that would be a different resolution that would come to you probably in November or December. Because the only procedural step that you have on the certificates, because if you choose to pay them off with cash, is you wouldn't have to, you're not issuing new bonds. So you would have, the board passes a resolution to call the certificates, and then a call notice is sent to your current investors. And they're required to receive a 30-day notice. So that's why I dropped November as a possible date, because if you wanted to call them on the earliest possible date, December 30th of 17, they would have to get that notice by the end of November. You're not required to call them on December 30th of 2017. It's not an option that expires. So if you end up calling them on January 10th of 18, that's still permissible.
So that is the next step, is that we're going to come to you in October with a parameters resolution for the refunding of the bonds. And then later in the winter, be talking to you about the debt certificates. So this was informational, and hope it was helpful.
I have one question. In your estimate of the $10 million in savings, in the past, you've thrown out these estimates when we've actually gotten a better rate. So explain again that the $12 million that's highlighted versus what you really, the present value. Explain that again, because...
Sure. what's highlighted is the actual levy reduction by year. And because those savings are over a 9-year period, you don't get it all today. A taxpayer is not going to experience all $12 million in 1 year. So because they're over time, we have to present value that number back to today's dollars. So that's the $10.6 million. And right now, if we sold them today, I think the final savings would be higher because we put a little bit of a cushion into the estimate of about 0.2%. Now we have the last few days, we've seen rates tick up a little bit. The Fed meets this week. They're expected to make some announcements. They're not expected to raise the Fed funds rate, which probably wouldn't have a big impact anyhow, but they are expected to announce what they plan to do with their balance sheet, which they plan to reduce. That could have some impact on the market. So some of that cushion could get eroded by the time you sell the bonds.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Next discussion item is high school curriculum classes.
Ready?
Yes.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to come to you tonight with some good opportunities for students. I'd like to introduce Mike Purcell, who's our Director of High School Core Curriculum. The work we're going to talk about tonight represents the work of a lot of teachers, administrators, and I'd especially like to thank our department chairs, Jackie Palmquist, Mary Nash, and Molly Owls for their help and support in working through some of these important courses for our students. According to Board Policy 640, we need to bring new courses and curriculum for your consideration. Tonight we'll be sharing with you some information about them. There's also information on board docs that's a little bit more detailed, and then we will come back to you on October 10th at that board meeting to request approval. The 4 courses we're going to talk to you about tonight are Math Fundamentals, Transition Math, Advanced Placement Computer Science Principles, and American Sign Language 3. That being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Purcell to give you a little bit more information.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, Board of Education, and I just want to echo Ms. Peace's statement about this has been, all these classes, a very collaborative effort. Jackie Palmquist is here representing her math department chair team, and who have a big load of these classes that are coming up, and a lot of work, pre-work, and then work coming up in that department based on your these recommendations and your approvals. So the first class that we'd like to talk to you about this evening is called Math Fundamentals. This has really been a collaboration between our math departments and our special ed department, Libby Jansen and the special ed department chairs, really looking at what are we doing for those students that come to us at the high school that are not yet Algebra 1 ready. We know that they all will be, but there's some of them, despite great efforts to get them there, depending on when they started with us or what their experience was, they're not quite Algebra 1 ready by the time when they get to us, and that's a group that we want to make sure that we're meeting their need. What we want to make sure is that we were creating a logical pathway to get those students to and through Algebra 2. There's been quite a bit of discussion here at this table how that really is sort of the gateway to being college ready. And so we wanted to make sure whatever pathway we were going to create, created a pathway for students that they could have a foundation of mathematics that allows them to get to and through that class, to allow them to have all sorts of options for themselves as they moved out of our system. The next slide gives a visual of what that could look like for our students, primarily freshmen coming in who are not yet Algebra 1 ready. We want to give them a very concentrated dose of those fundamental skills. There's a detailed document on the board docs about what the curriculum of that class would be, so that they were ready for Algebra 1 their sophomore year, could then move through without any outside of the school year experiences and do geometry and then Algebra 2. And we know based on our data, looking back over years, is that getting to and through that class is where we want students in order to be college ready. This slide just gives a little more about that, and really that was the focus of this group, was to create that pathway for those students. The course content of this looks a good deal like things that are in Algebra 1. It's a thing that these are the foundation skills, the fundamental skills for students to be really ready for those classes, both the Algebra 1 class and then those applications that come up in geometry, and those applications that come up then again in Algebra 2. And what we want to make sure is that we're creating a foundation, those fundamental understandings that students need in order to be successful in all of our math classes, in addition to the science classes and the application classes in our business and TE areas where all of these skills are fundamental skills that our students need. This class really has been a partnership between the math departments and the special education departments in terms of constructing what that course looks like, and the scope and the sequence and the pacing and the assessments that go along with that. It's been a real celebration of work between those two groups.
Guys, do you want questions after each class, or would you like them at the end?
Just questions whenever you have them, it would be great.
Okay. Anyone have questions with the fundamental?
I have one, but go ahead.
Go ahead.
So you mentioned special ed, collaborating with them. So is this class then primarily for students with IEPs?
Yeah.
Or is it open to just struggling students?
Absolutely. It's a course in our regular ed course book. That would be the proposal, and it would be almost certainly a co-taught class. And typically that our sections fall within the parameters of what the rest of our co-taught classes are, that kind of general guideline of 70-30 in terms of proportionality.
Okay.
Other questions? I do have some. With the graduation requirements require 3 credits, and for a student to get to Algebra 2, which again is the gateway to college success, a student would have to take 4 math classes. Have you guys kind of conceptualized how you're going to encourage those who are able to take that Algebra 2 class without the kid just saying, geez, I'm done? Because that Algebra 2 class is so important. Yeah. You know, it's critical, and anyone who's able needs to take that class. I don't know how to emphasize that more than that, but you guys have to be thinking about this.
Mr. Rizak, I couldn't agree with you more, and really what we fundamentally believe is that if kids are poised to be successful in those classes that lead up to Algebra 2, they're far more likely to enroll in it. That if they've seen places where they haven't been successful along the way because we didn't take that opportunity to slow down in order to move faster, that those kids, you know, what we don't want is pushing kids into Algebra 1 and then having them not be successful and then having them take it again. Then we're in the same place. Rather we're building them up to get there instead of kind of failing forward. So those are, and what we want is those kids to have a really solid foundation. We know that they can be ready. They're just not ready yet, and every student's reason why they're not ready yet is a little bit different. But we want to have a plan in place for them to be successful moving forward and have those fundamental skills so that they can be successful in this class and Algebra 1 and geometry, and then be prepared to take that on. And the truth is that an overwhelming majority of our students do engage in a 4th year of mathematics. That's culturally just kind of who we are.
And I think our guidance counselors, our math teachers are with kids, encouraging them and helping them see the importance of taking that Algebra 2 as well.
Okay, as I reviewed the course sequencing, I've seen some of the courses have an essential designation. What's the difference between like Algebra 2, and then Algebra 1, 2 essentials?
Yeah, so let's pick one and be easier to illustrate. So the Algebra 2 Essentials class really comes out of our teachers come together in each of our courses, so in Algebra 2 in this case, and say, here are, we prioritize our standards and all this. What we know is, and being a former math teacher, not all standards are created equal. There are some things that are very, very important and some things that are lesser important. Particularly, those ones that are lesser important are typically ones that are non-sequential. You don't need them to go on to the next class, right? So what the Algebra 2 Essentials class does is they make sure that they get those essential things in, and that's the guaranteed and viable part, right? And then they look to expand past that, where our Algebra 2 class says, we're anticipating to go in and do all of those, and then if there's a thing where we're getting off base a little bit, we may drop one or two here and there of those lower priority standards. But that's sort of the approach from the teacher point of view, is between the Essentials class and the regular class.
So I'm still a little confused. So what kind of kid goes into an essential class and what kid goes into, for lack of a better term, the regular class? Like
Not
if
sure
you're
about
in
kind of
Algebra
kid.
2, if I had a choice between Algebra 2 and Algebra 2 Essentials, is there a learning style characteristic of those students who go into those two different classes?
Perfect. Typically, it's pace. That the Algebra 2 Essentials allows for a little more time to really dig into those core pieces. So typically, it's a pacing that for our students who need a little more time, maybe a couple different modalities to get at those high priority topics, will enroll in our Essentials class.
Okay, thanks.
So is this something that's identified at the 8th grade level? I mean, is the 8th grade student taking a different course and therefore is getting, as they come into the freshman year, they're getting some of what was taught at 8th grade? How?
Great question. Yeah, so we are looking for students that would be enrolled in this class, typically have been getting some math support in our middle schools, and maybe that support has gotten them to close the gap some, but maybe not all the way, right? And typically they're in a class, they're in a regular 8th grade class, but maybe they weren't as successful as they needed to be. So there's still some things in that 8th grade content that we need to go back and really solidify before we move forward.
Okay, to move on.
All right. This next course is a course where we are working on called Transition Math in partnership with the College of DuPage. The motivation for this really has been something that our department chairs would tell you they've been efforting for years and years. We've gotten College of DuPage to come to the table because of some recent legislation, the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act, which mandated that the community colleges and the high schools work on a course like this. And what I mean by like this is that students would engage in coursework that was agreed upon by both the community college and the high school. Upon successful completion of that work, they would be prepared and then be eligible to enroll in college credit-bearing coursework at the community college. Some nuances to that is that the legislation only impacts community colleges for now and isn't transferable necessarily to our directional schools or other Illinois schools, but we're hoping that with some success here, that would be the next step out. Really, the department chairs, the ones that are here in Indian Prairie and all across DuPage County, have really come together to work with College of DuPage to really say what are the things that should be in this class, and then to work on what does that transition look like between completing your senior year in this course, and then where are you going and how are we going to make sure that you're prepared to be there. The next slide really talks about what this would look like in terms of implementation here in Indian Prairie. Our teachers are really advocating for taking the one semester trigonometry class, which is a class that some kids take in their senior year, the one semester statistics class, and then taking those and combining those with some of these transition topics in order to take a 1 year-long class that some seniors would be able to take in order to move forward. The typical student that would be taking this class would be kids that are now taking that trigonometry class and or the statistics class. Some kids enroll for one or the other, some for both. And we're really hoping with this kind of golden ticket that we're proposing for kids as they get out, that we can scoop up some of those kids that are choosing maybe not to enroll in a math class their senior year, or in just a half a year, to if we can get them engaged. One of the great parts of this class is, well, one of the things that we know is these two topics that we're teaching now, the teachers are doing a great job, and there's a really important mathematical topics. But our students, as they're going into College of DuPage and even some of our other schools that we drive a lot of kids to, there's a placement exam that goes along with those. And even if there wasn't a placement exam, a lot of the content in that year one class is algebra based. And there's just a gap in that learning. So what we want to do for these students, particularly in that and this track, is to say, hey, let's make sure we just weave this heart of algebra, that's a kind of an SAT phrase, into this class to make sure that is all front brain for you as you're transitioning on to what's next in your academic career. So we're going to have those algebra topics in there, in addition to an exploration of the trigonometry and statistics as part of that transition math class. We're really working hard with the College of DuPage. It's been a long relationship, and we're starting to move the needle a little bit, but it's slow. Really what we're looking for is to de-emphasize, ideally, and to eliminate the need for a placement test. But that is something that is still in negotiations, or we're working it out a little bit, exactly what the placement requirements will be, that we, by law, by that Workplace Readiness Act, this actually doesn't need to be enacted until 1920, but we are so motivated to get this done. We're bringing this to you now so that we can start moving kids down that path. We just want to make sure we can get as many kids into those credit-bearing classes right away as we can. Our teachers are doing a great job. We just want to make sure that they are as prepared and can kind of smooth their way in to COD or to wherever it is they want to go for their next phase.
I think this is a great idea, because I know a few years ago we talked about that need for that remedial type of placement, even though we provide such a great education in our math department. But so I think this is a great idea. With this act, was there any funding that came with that?
I guess you know the answer.
Yeah, I know the
Could be
answer.
noted, the giggle.
Yeah. So I knew the answer to that, but so with our teachers and obviously working with College of DuPage, is there a cost that you can associate with this? The time, is there a cost that you can associate?
So the cost that we've had associated so far is the time of the math department chairs and myself working with that team. That is time, and that's time that we would be doing other things, right? So the next cost is to say, we brought a curriculum team together last fall. This is kind of say, hey, let's kind of wrap our head around what this could look like, and just so that when we came here, we weren't coming with a blank piece of paper saying, hey, we're going to do something. And so that's curriculum time. That's subbing people out, and the summer hours go along with that. What we don't know is that at the end of this, we got to put some resources in our teachers' hands to support that too, and that's a very tangible cost, right? So those are all pieces of the puzzle here. But I agree with you, Ms. Price. This is something where we can really tangibly make a difference for kids right at the end of our rope, and certainly worth the efforts.
It's too bad it took a bill to make this happen, but I'm glad I think it's a good thing. So,
if I could just ask a question.
Good mandate, interesting.
It's kind of funny, Mike, you and I were having a lot of these conversations a couple
Right.
of weeks ago. What made us go this route, I guess? Was it a combination of things, the state? Was it a combination of what we saw at COD? I'm just wondering why the change from what we've currently been doing. And there was a question asked by a board member as far as, assessment testing that COD was doing, and there was some mention of Compass, which to me is more reliable because it's associated with ACT, it's the same people. And now they went the Alex route, which to me is not reliable. It's not based in fact because it's another publishing company. And it's based on this artificial intelligence thing that they're trying to sell their product. But, I'm trying to find out where lies the truth. I mean, are we assessing our own kids? Are we relying on data? What's making us go this route? Because I want to understand it personally, what's in the best interest of our kids.
Great question, Mr. Rise. It's a couple different trains coming into the station at the same time, frankly. Let me back up a little bit. Our folks couldn't be happier that the compass test has gone away, to be honest with you. ACT at one point stepped out and said it's actually not as good a test as we thought it was.
Okay.
It's actually, all colleges have walked away from it, and math people couldn't be happier. So now, how good this one is, I don't know. But we know that the one that we had was no good, so at least that's a step forward. The piece, though, that really kind of the why, the compelling why here is that we have kids that we know are prepared for college and college-ready things that aren't qualifying. So there's two things that we wanted to kind of take a look at. One, making sure that we engage as many kids as we could in a complete 4-year experience, right? So that was really something the teachers, kind of unbeknownst that some of this legislation was going on, came to me. Some of those teachers from the trigonometry and the probability statistics class said, like, what if we looked at this? And what if we kind of made it a full year experience? And what if we integrated some algebra in it? So I said, well, that's a great idea. Let's talk about that a little bit more, right? So they actually kind of came to that, and this came to the table. And truthfully, the math DCs have been kind of pushing for what can we do, and really to kind of put some pressure on, particularly College DuPage, for quite a while. The other piece is that there's a gap, no matter what school they're going to, there's a gap between when they end their algebra experience with us and when they take their assessment. And what we want to do is narrow that time gap some, right? Just to kind of spiral through some of those algebra concepts, which no matter where you go, that's going to be part of whatever the assessment is, that's going to be part of what you're assessed on. So we want to make sure that we're keeping that at the front of their brains as we're moving them forward. So we don't think there's going to be a lot of we don't think a lot of kind of reteaching that class, a lot of reminding, a lot of refreshing, a lot of kind of going deeper into some of those topics.
So is this kind of like you and I were talking about, that integrated math approach, where it's taking all the concepts and having them every single year, make sure students understand how they're tied together instead of taking your algebra 1, geometry, algebra 2 type of thing?
That's a very good.
Go ahead.
That's that integrated math.
I'm probably digging way too deep.
Yeah, the integrated math pathways is a really kind of a different approach to how you kind of could have attacked the Common Core state standards as they were being adopted, right? So one was what they called the traditional pathway, which was the Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2 pathway, and the other one was to integrate some of those topics through the years, and there were some models that were published along with that. The challenge with that, doing that, was that just the assessments were unknown at that time, and we needed to kind of move and put something into place. So actually very few districts locally went to an integrated model, just a few. There are a couple out there. This does have integration, but it's not really connected to how that model goes. So it really is taking some of these topics, like some of the statistics topics, some of the trigonometry topics, and then looking at going back. It's more a little bit more of a kind of a spiraling of what those topics would be.
Can I, you kind of referred to how many students were from our district, which I was kind of shocked by those numbers. So what is got a prediction of if they're taking, first of all, you got to get them to take this course, and then they'll place differently, hopefully. So do you have a prediction of what that number, first of all, what did it start at, and what are you looking to reduce it by?
So we have more students that go to College DuPage than any other, university or college coming out as graduates. So we about 400 students a year come from Indian Prairie and go to College DuPage. About 40 to 45%, depending on the year, of them are placed in developmental math, and I know that's just not kind of where they are, right? So our target is first to reduce that number, and we think we can do it and better prepare them at the same time. So some of it is making sure that they are just ready, right? Not that they were never ready. It's just we want to make sure they're ready then, right? So it would be disingenuous to kind of give you a guess or number. I don't know. Obviously, we think it's going to be better, otherwise we wouldn't be here tonight.
Yeah.
And you know, we're going to drive to make that number 0. But you know, will we ever achieve that? I don't know. But just kind of, right, any other number I would give you would be throwing a dart at a board.
Personal experience of a student who scored like a 34 in his ACT in math and was, you know, I can't remember what entry-level math they were trying to put him in. And, yeah, that was my first experience with COD's testing. And I just felt like unless he had had a parent that was advocating and saying, no, you go back there and do it again,
Right.
because there was a gap. And it was a gap.
Yep.
You know, there was just a gap they had forgotten about.
Yep.
And had a brush up on. But what a disservice that is to the community. And here we are, the K-12 public institution, taking up the cost for our community so that our families don't have to pay for those remedial classes on top of all the other classes our students have to take in order to finish college. So really applaud it, but we keep taking on a lot of costs that are not supposed to be ours, I would say.
Well, I think there's a couple of things working together. I think our DCs have seen a need for just looking at coursework, but I also think that working with COD to try to merge that and help them see that same thing. If we can help however many kids we help start and get college credit for a course that they're taking right off the bat, which encourages them to continue down that pathway and keep going, is worth whatever cost.
Yeah.
I do understand we would rather not have to do that. We'd rather keep things, but at this point, it's what's best for our kids.
It is, absolutely. So thank you, guys.
So is this class in lieu of that test?
That's the negotiation piece,
Yeah.
which all of our superintendents in DuPage County have also taken up the cause, and just working on some, maybe a sliding scale or some things like that. But at this time, it is not in lieu of the assessment.
What the law says is they can't just use a score anymore,
Right.
one test score.
Because it's critical that when somebody goes to COD, you don't take a class that you have to pay for and you don't get credit.
Right.
And it's beyond me how somebody can have an ACT of 34 or go through 3 years of instruction in Indian Prairie District 204 and have difficulty with that test.
Because what the colleges are doing now is they're pre-testing them as they come into college. So they're not even taking into consideration the college entry. I mean, they are. I mean, they're looking at your ACT or SAT scores. But a lot of these colleges now are pre-testing them, like with the ALEC stuff. I mean, so it's like, where do you, I mean,
Yeah. It didn't, yeah,
where do you draw the line? I mean, it's ridiculous.
interesting.
Are we ready to move?
Yep.
Go ahead.
You are, we are.
The next course for your information this evening is Advanced Placement Computer Science Principles. This is designed to be the equivalent of a first semester introductory college computing course. This is part of our bigger conversations about what does computer science look like for all of our students. We do have one Advanced Placement Computer Science class already. It's called AP Computer Science A. AP Computer Science A is based in Java. That is the foundation for that course. This course, which is also a full-year course, is really based on the logic and the reasoning, and is platform agnostic. As you see in the supporting curriculum documents that are on the board docs, it really is about sort of the logic and the reasoning, even the questions that you would see on an assessment, and the computational thinking practices that are up there, and the big ideas up there as well. Those big ideas are the same big ideas you would see in any computer science framework. If this is an approved course, when we come back next time, we'll gather the team together to start investigating what the best platform is for our kids to meet these needs. We didn't want to go in and do that in advance of your consideration. That felt premature. So, what exactly the language will be is yet to be determined, but the outcomes as established by College Board and Advanced Placement are the ones that you see in front of you here.
Just two quick questions. This new AP, this was a new one for the AP board? Okay.
It was.
And then, I'm getting a little ahead, but design for us to look at for 18-19 school year, beginning
Yes.
next school year?
The reason we're here today is because we start work on the course catalog fairly quickly. They, Royal, and so we want to make sure it gets in there.
And the final one for this evening is our American Sign Language 3. I've been here with the Board of Education a handful of times to discuss the ASL program, thriving in all three of our high schools, and certainly a pipeline of students that are in 1 and 2 now, and looking to bring a third level to that and get it into the course book for the 18-19 school year.
And this does count as a foreign language? Okay.
So as I said at the beginning, thank you for your time. Those are our 4 courses. We'll come back to you October 10th and request approval. If there are no more questions.
Just real quick question on this sign language 3. Is that an honors course? Is that considered honors?
No.
No.
Okay.
So is that the most advanced, or are you thinking there's going to be a sign language 4?
Oh, we'll see. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to, based on enrollment and those things. Right?
Quick question. District Policy 6:40, superintendent shall recommend curriculum, 7 different factors there. We went into the weeds a little bit. The curriculum that's being recommended meets all those 7 requirements of the policy, right? Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, we are now moving to the agenda item of annual recruitment and hiring report. We have several people who have stayed. Thank you so much for your patience. For public comment. The public comment statement that I read for non-agenda items does hold for agenda items. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes. I ask Bertha Johnson to come up, please.
Thanks for sticking around.
Yes.
I'm actually, good evening. I'm actually Tyreka Horn. Bertha couldn't be here, so I took her spot. But like I said, my name is Tyreka Horn, and I am new to the district. I've only been here, this is our 3rd year, and I have 3 here. I have a sophomore at Waubonsie, a middle schooler at Skull, and a 6th grader, and then a 1st grader at Fry. So I'm just here to kind of encourage the district to continue the recruiting efforts to kind of diversify the staff. I remember when I was growing up in Kalamazoo, Michigan, I remember my first African-American teacher, and she was so important in my life, and she was an algebra teacher, and I was not strong in math at all, but she encouraged me, and she poured into my life, and she continued to pour in my life until I graduated from high school, and then I went on to University of Michigan, and so it's just my hope that, there's always one of us here. So it's just my hope that my kids will at least be able to have that same experience that I had with the teacher that shared my cultural background and cultural experiences. So I just want to encourage the district to kind of keep pushing.
Are you a teacher?
No. Social worker. I was a social worker.
Kathy was about to recruit you. That's why.
So thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrell Williams, I think. Welcome.
All right, good evening. My name is Terrell Williams, and I'm the Vice President of Pages, as well as a proud parent of a student attending Waubonsie Valley High School. So I'm honored to have an opportunity to speak as a representative from P3, which is our 3 African American parent groups, Pages, PASS, and PACES, who collectively support the hiring initiative by assisting the board with visibility to potential qualified African American teachers. Tonight, I'm excited to hear that the board is taking the initiative to address some of the hiring gaps within District 204. So thank you. African American students make up 9% of the student population within District 204. African American teachers make up 3% of the teacher population. To me, that signifies an alarm at the gate. With the low percentage of African American teachers, I believe that that correlates directly to the current achievement gap. Together, we need to address the underrepresented proportion of African American teachers within District 204. I personally stand before you an example of having African American teachers that inspired me, encouraged me to achieve in academics, also in sports, which in turn drove me to be a successful leader within my community, my church, and corporate America. I believe that our African American students need to see more African American teachers, identifying with them to be role models, to be a voice of support and academic encouragement. So I ask that we collectively look at the current review process and look at it to be more of a stronger initiative to hire more African American teachers as we collectively answer this alarm that's ringing at the gate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And our last speaker is Andrea Collier.
Sorry. Timing. Good evening.
Good evening.
I am, again, Andrea Collier, also known as AJ, and I am the mother of one current student at Waubonsee and two graduates currently in college, and I'm also the current president of Pages at Waubonsee. And I want to say, first of all, that I do love this district. I do. My children have grown up in this district, and they've done well in this district. And we love our teachers and our staff at Waubonsee. But this is not about me or my children. It's about our African American students as a collective body, and as you know, they're not doing well. And when we highlighted the alarming gap back in January of 2016, we did at that time acknowledge the shared responsibility of our parents, the school, and the community to ensure the success of our children. So together, the leadership of our parent groups identified a few areas that we thought were important to focus on, more importantly, areas where we thought we could help. And hiring of teachers that looked like us was one of those areas. Some quick anecdotal data. When I polled our leadership team about teachers, the most that any of us have had, or most of us have had, only about one African American teacher for our children for the entire tenure of their term in the district, if any at all. One African American teacher. And this is significant because in February of 2016, the administration gave a presentation to the board on the achievement gap in this district, and they cited Hanover research, documented December 2011. And it specifically noted hiring African American teachers at the top of the list for closing the achievement gap. And in that same presentation from the administration, it noted that African American were about 3% of the teacher population and 9% of the student population. And fast forward to today, for the presentation that we're about to see today, it neither listed the demographic breakdown of the 126 teachers that have been hired, nor did it list the current demographic of the teacher population. So the question that I have is, have we moved the needle at all? It does, however, list 3 slides or so detailing all the difficulties in hiring teachers, and I completely get that. What I'd like to offer, however, is that we model that which we teach our children, and that is, let's look for the reasons that we can and not the reasons that we can't. And the number one reason that we can is us as a parent group. So I just want to offer that we're serious, we're focused, and we're here to help. Looking forward to a great year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Board of Education, for the time this evening. I am open to suggestions from the community as we look to focus on our workforce. Every year we talk about our annual hiring report and what happened during the hiring season. This year I am going to talk a little bit more about some challenges we face in both getting the teacher shortages that we face, as well as the lack of diversity in the teaching workforce in general, and looking at retention of our staff. With me this evening is Carrie Beth Harry, who is our coordinator in human resources. She is a go-to person for a lot of our administrators, works with them through much of the hiring process, and I kind of say that she, I think, talks to almost one of the first people that talks to any new hire in our district, helps to organize all the new hire orientations and get them through the entire process. So she's going to go ahead and start our presentation with some of the facts about our hiring season.
Good evening. Thank you for providing us this opportunity to share our annual hiring report with you. As you know, one of the most important things that our administration does is hire the right educator in their building. And the summer months are some of the busiest for the HR department, from the processing of resignations and their replacements to transfers and rehires. Our department works very closely with administration, staff, and those new hires to make sure that everyone's in place on the first day. The first slide here represents the grouping of our hiring report classifications. So please understand that this is a single point in time. We use September 1st for our hiring report. Our administration makes up 2.86% of our staff, teachers 66.8%. Our classified support staff includes our teaching assistants and secretaries is 24.83%, and our non-bargaining staff, which includes nurses, OTs and PTs, and then department staff here at the district office is 5.51%. The baseline FTE for the 2017-18 school year is 3,045.2. While we're up a total of 37.3 FTE from the beginning of last year, so the number that was presented to you in the 16-17 annual hiring report, most of that came throughout the 16-17 school year and was heavily subsidized by special education grants. We only increased 4.1 positions since the end of the 16-17 school year and have remained within budget. Special education makes up 76% of the 37.3 positions. Our number of students with IEPs has increased by more than 10%, while our overall student enrollment has decreased. So the positions that we listed here, all 7.2 new licensed positions were for special education. Of the 24.5 classified positions, 17.5 were for special education. 7.0 were for enrollment last year. Those were replaced by other support positions this year. 2.6 of the non-bargaining are for special education, which includes nurses and OTs. And the 1.0 new administrative position was for special education. As you know, last year we did not enact a reduction in force. We released our part-time, grant-funded, and one-year contract positions along with any performance-based releases, and we rehired 76% of those released. Our new hire class was slightly more than last year. We hired 126.4 FTE. We hired 5% more female teachers than we did last year, and we're noticing a national trend in less male teachers in the profession and coming through the traditional education programs. We hired almost twice as many teachers with 10 plus years of experience as we did last year.
These teachers are scattered throughout the salary schedule and took positions in both hard-to-fill, content-specific areas and classrooms that needed a veteran teacher with diverse experience to both support the students and the team that they were joining. Once again, this year, 48% of our new hires were done in July and August. However, we hired more teachers this year, so the volume was higher.
I know Board Member Razak had asked a question about what can we do about that percentage. We were about 48% last year hired in July, August. The year before that, it was around 70%. So we have come down quite a bit. We have talked about, are there still some things we can do to try and hire earlier? And we did have conversations in May or June to maybe try to hire some teachers that we didn't have a spot for at that time because we knew we would have a place for them in July, August. But we do fear being overstaffed in those positions, and we do try to stick to our budget. And so we do throughout the summer, because of late registrations, we have kids drop, we have kids add, we have all different needs that kind of arise. We're transferring teachers, unfortunately, from one building to another building last minute because we had students leave this building and go to another building. So it is a struggle. In education right now, I would say we're also seeing a lot more late resignations, people kind of leaving last minute to other job openings in other districts. And so we're going to continue to try and get our hire done earlier. I know everybody would love to have our hiring done earlier. It is a challenge we face. We've made some improvements there, and we'll continue to talk about different ways that we can do that. I think that could help us. As you know, one of the reasons we were looking at that in May was seeing if we could do a better job of diversifying our workforce. Was we had some candidates that we thought, well, let's hire them now even though we don't have a position, but that resulted in some challenges at that time as well.
On the hard-to-fill slide, you can see special education positions continue to be hard-to-fill areas. We also struggled producing a plentiful pool of candidates in some of the high school subject areas that are listed here.
This next slide is just talking a little bit about teacher shortages. The last data we have, Title II, it is kind of a data warehouse. It gathers information about students planning on being teachers in the teacher education pipeline. The most recent data is from 2014-15, where you'll see that the total amount of students enrolled in any teacher education program in Illinois was 13,797. That is at any level. That could be freshmen, sophomore, juniors, or seniors. And of that group, 5,520 had completed. You'll notice in 2010-11, there were 32,000 enrolled, just over 32,000 enrolled, with just over 10,000 completing. So you can kind of see when there were 32,000, the 10,000 that completed, that meant you were down to like 22,000 for the following year. And so that's when you see in 11-12, it was 26,000. So they either only got 14,000 freshmen coming in, or they had people drop out of the program with a larger number of freshmen coming into the program. That's most recent, as I said, was 14-15. It doesn't feel like it's gotten any better since then, as the costs of tuition in Illinois have increased. As state funding has kind of decreased for higher education, I eagerly look for new data coming out each year to see, but I'm fearing that it's not getting any better. The other piece of information I put on here is just Illinois in general. We have about 130,000 teachers in Illinois. That is typically in most of our public schools or charter schools count towards that number, and the average annual retention is 85.8%. So doing the rough math there, each year Illinois needs to fill approximately 18,000 teaching positions. So obviously you have a smaller number that is graduating from universities in Illinois to teach those positions, so they're also taking obviously people who maybe weren't hired the previous year or have been away from the profession for a while. And Illinois fills about, well, as of 2012, the most recent time I could find that data, Illinois only filled about 75% of the open positions with teachers from in-state programs at that time. So Illinois is relying heavily on teachers from out-of-state programs as well. I just wanted to, some of the information provided in that report too is kind of the breakdown of that 2014-15 data. So here you just see the number of students enrolled in teacher education programs by ethnicity or race. There was no demographic information available about the students who completed the program. As I showed you, 13,797 were in the programs and over 5,000 completed. There was no breakdown for that information. Diversity can be defined as the sum of the ways that people are both alike and different. The dimensions of diversity include race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, language, culture, religion, mental and physical ability, class, and immigration status. That came from the National Education Association website. For our purposes, we will be focusing our next few slides on the diversity or lack thereof regarding race, ethnicity in our workforce. First, I think it's important to know why do we feel that having a more diverse teaching workforce is critical. Racial diversity benefits the entire workforce and all students. Building relationships with someone of a different race helps to neutralize unconscious bias and helps prepare all students for the real world that they're going into. Studies have shown that students of color who have at least one teacher that looks like them correlates to higher academic performance, lower dropout rates, and lower discipline rates. And so that's why we continue to try to focus on what can we do to diversify our workforce. Through this, obviously, we want to hire the best, the most highly qualified candidates, but we do want to increase, we understand the importance of increasing the diversity of our workforce. This year, 10.8%, this is as of September 1st, 10.8% of our new license hires were persons of color. The overall percentage of licensed staff of color remained at 10.9%. 23.8% of our classified and non-bargaining hires were persons of color. We are concerned about, obviously, the workforce, the teaching workforce. I'm, keep trying to look at what changes there are out there. It hasn't changed much in Illinois since 2002. We faced many obstacles along the way. I think at times we've appreciated that when we look at our comparable school districts, we have one of the higher percentages of diverse staff compared to those other comparable districts, but we're not happy with that. And seeing our percentage this year, I was disappointed to see that percentage. We continue to want to increase in that area. I'm going to talk a little bit about the different things that we've tried to do, as well as some of the challenges that we've faced as well.
Did you have a question, sir?
I'll go ahead and wait until. Thank you.
Some of the things that we've done differently, you'll see in a couple of my slides that we changed our exit survey this year. We wanted to gather some information that we thought would be a little bit more useful. I'll get into that into a few slides about how that was different, but we were asking for more. It's an anonymous survey, but we did ask for more specific demographic information so that we can look at why are people leaving, and maybe there's some things we can point out specific to race or other characteristics that might help us identify why people are leaving. We have a new human resources hiring video, just trying to find candidates in general, and this has been going out to universities when we go to present or to talk about this. It's also on our website. In case you have not seen the hiring video, it's not very long.
If you are coming to 204, be ready to be a lifelong learner, be ready to build relationships, and be really ready to grow with the world. The district will grow right with it.
Indian Prairie District 204 is a large unit district that encompasses students from the cities of Naperville and Aurora primarily, but also small sections of Bolingbrook and Plainfield. We serve about 28,500 students across 33 schools. We have just over 3,000 employees, with just over 2,000 of them being licensed teachers. We're an incredibly diverse community. So we certainly reflect the world when our students leave that they're going to work and live and play in, and that diversity is something that we really celebrate here in the district.
The community in 204 is diverse. We have families from all different backgrounds, speak so many different languages. There's so many opportunities for us to learn from one another.
We have students from all socioeconomic backgrounds, different ethnicities, and they are going to get a top-notch education when they come to 204. No matter where you come from, you are going to get the best education because the teachers are prepared and are always doing professional development to make sure that we are the best.
Great teachers are lifelong learners, and this is a place that I think that demands that you be a lifelong learner. Our expectations are that our teachers are part of very vibrant professional learning communities that they direct, and that we do our best as a district to try to support them in that.
Each Wednesday we have professional development in different areas, from technology to behavior management to curriculum. And then in the district level, we have professional development through the IPSD Academy, and we are able to choose areas that we think that we need strength in.
We've done a lot of work in the area of using technology in this district to enhance teachers' pedagogy and their practices. We don't see technology as the solution, but we see it as an accelerator of learning that teachers can use in their classroom practices that can assist our students as they go out into a world that's demanding different skills.
What sets 204 apart from other districts is our desire to be innovative. We realize that technology is something that's constantly changing, and in order for us to prepare our students to be future ready, we make sure that we are in touch with what's going on, and we figure out how to incorporate that into our teaching and across subject areas.
They really benefited from having that Chromebook in front of them. I think it helped them with their organization. They always knew what their assignments were, what their homework was each night. They knew when their upcoming assessments were. It also helped them understand the concepts a lot better.
District 204 is a great place to work for many reasons, one of which we're in an incredibly supportive community that really values education and is the first to step up and say, how can we help the schools? And you don't have that everywhere. It's a really great position to be in when you have such great community support for education. And then I think the culture and the environment here, in which, you know, we're continually striving to be better, to learn, to support our teachers in their development. We want to provide the absolute best possible education for our students. And then that next year, with that next group, we want to be even better.
Be ready to be transformed. Here at 204, we're big about being professional, building relationships with students, building relationships with staff, and we're really big about having lifelong learners and being ready for the future.
I want to thank the communication department for their work on that. One of the reasons that we felt it was important to get that communication out there is people hear Naperville, and for whatever reason, they don't think about how diverse we really are here. And so it was important for us to want to share that information because we want our teaching workforce to also represent the diversity. So we thought it was a good message to get out to the universities in what we're looking for. Some other things we've done is some college and university outreach, working with Yvette on trying to talk with the university to ask how can we get more diverse candidates? What can we do? Can we help each other? Just trying to have discussions around that. Some universities were receptive and made time to that. So we did have some meetings. Yvette's gone out and done some presentations. We've attended job fairs and brought groups of people to do some job fairs, very local. And really, I've been trying to beg for any student teachers they have of color, saying that we would find a spot for them in our buildings. And also hearing maybe what some roadblocks to those have been. of getting student teachers in our buildings. Continuing to look at research, there are places that are finding some success in whether it's through grow your own programs. Some people are working with their communities because their communities have other struggles where they're looking where they can join with the school district to solve some of their problems. And just trying to see what are other people doing to increase the diversity of their workforce. Also, we've taken a big focus on just trying to build an inclusive culture. We've mandated some questions that have to be asked during interviews about just teaching in a more diverse population and being inclusive. We've made a big emphasis on building relationships and the importance of that. Working with our district equity leadership team, who's been surveying community members about the different things that we can do different. And just trying to see, what are steps we can take in that area. And then I guess that does go along with kind of the hiring process and just some of the expectations we have there in what we're looking for in candidates and what we're communicating across all the different levels for expectations. We want the best and we want to increase the diversity of our workforce. We have noticed, we have faced some challenges. As I said, we were going to try to hire a group of students a little bit earlier in the summer. And one of the places that we went to do some mock interviews with candidates at a job fair, after interviewing them and feeling pretty good about many of the candidates, we found out that they were Golden Apple Scholars, which presented an additional kind of roadblock for us. Golden Apple Scholars is it's a program to try to increase teachers out there and to increase diverse teaching workforce. And then we started receiving questions from these candidates about they needed a qualification. They could only teach in schools that were at least 30% more of the students were on free and reduced lunch, or through academic need, that the schools whose state test results show that the percentage of students who approach, meet, or exceed state standards is less than or equal to 60%. So we all of a sudden had this roadblock of people that we also struggled to hire, where we thought we had a good pool of candidates that provided another limitation. So we continue. I feel bad when I talk about this because at times I feel like I'm being defensive. And I'm really trying to take every step possible, open to suggestions on what we can do. And I look forward to some questions with that as well.
Doug, I appreciate the conversations that you and I've had surrounding this issue. One of the things is there were a couple comments during the public comment session, and there was some information that was provided to the board in transparency. We may want to consider. There were some questions regarding looking at
different groups and disparities.
Exactly.
Sure.
So that may be.
Yeah, I'd be glad to share that information. I know right now one of our biggest disparity areas is we're around 3% of our teaching force is Asian, and 24.5% of our students are Asian. We're around 3% for African American or Black, with just under 10% of our students. And then with our Hispanic or Latino students, we're around just slightly under 4% there, with over 10% of our student population. So we are definitely seeing areas there. Some things that, one of the things that has been challenging is we have about $5,000 in our recruitment budget. That was slashed along when most of the items in the budget were slashed. And just so you know, some things I will probably spend over in that area this year. I've reached out to some different universities to maybe attend their job fairs, one being UIC, where I feel like there might be a more diverse candidate pool from what I've been told, as well as ISU. But it does take it's quite a bit of money to attend the job fairs. You would think that the universities, because they want their people to be hired, but it just happens that way. And so You know, typically it's about $1,500 to get tables or booths at some of the larger ones. There was just a big Diversity Employment Day career fair in early September, and to have one booth there was $2,700. And so that is an area that's presented some challenges. We've had conversations. The district used to go out of state to try to recruit. I don't know how much they actually saw that worked, because we do struggle with incentivizing people to come here. You might go there, but then what do you have in place? You know, we struggle with different ways to find compensation to do that. I think we have an amazing teaching staff in here that tries to help everybody feel welcome, and tries to do a lot of informal mentoring for staff, and I do feel it's a great place to be. So we have that, but that's more of a, hey, I can tell you how great we are, and this is what we do. But a lot of times when it comes to financially incentivizing, that's an area that we struggle with.
Certainly one suggestion for those across the board on our staff of color, and as you're reaching out, and whether people want to consider certainly having those persons be able to share experiences of why they love our district so much, and the students that they're working with, and that type of thing. So if those opportunities arise, that may be a suggestion to consider as well.
Yeah, I really like that suggestion, because not only do we have to hire diverse staff, we have to retain them. And I think that's a question that people have. Is this a good place to be, and is this a good place to be for 4 or 5 years or more? So I like that suggestion.
Can I make a request when we have this discussion next time? Because back in 2009, I remember our first presentation on retaining a more diverse workforce in District 204. 2009, I remember that. Kathy was on board. I remember you were one of the spearheaders of that. So thank you. But, well, no, I just remember this specifically because you and I were involved in PDAC and everything else. And I remember in 2011, the Board of Education started writing district goals around our staffing and retaining a good workforce and everything else. What I'd really like to see, though, because these numbers are great, but I know since 2009, 2011, our diversity has gone up. I'm just wondering how our diversity in our teaching, where has that been steady? Has that gone up a little bit? You know, to say that we have 10% of our staff is diverse, well, what does that look like? I mean, how does that comparative nationally? You know, as Ms. Collier was saying earlier, you know, they surveyed their parents, and it's like, you know, an African-American male student has had one, teacher of color. But I read that NEA study, and it was like, Detroit kids have one teacher of color. So is that the norm, or is that and I'm just trying to get a sense of it for myself.
Right. It's definitely a struggle. The workforce diversity has not changed much since 2002. It's actually increased slightly with Hispanic, Latino, but actually has decreased slightly with our Black or African American. I'm a product of CPS, and even there, they've noticed a steady decline. Back in 2002, 40% of their teaching workforce was Black or African American, and it's down to, in 2015, it was at 23%, which I heard it's about 19% right now. So it's definitely a struggle, but I think it's also a struggle because, just getting people to be teachers is a struggle. I was trying to reach out to our high schools just to try to find out how many students are in future educators or in Educators Rising. I think Matia Valley, the enrollment number they shared from last year was 10 that they had as part of theirs, and I believe it was 16 at Waubonsie. I wasn't able to get Neuqua Valley's numbers yet there. That doesn't mean that's the only people that want to be teachers. They're just part of that activity or club. But I'm looking at other opportunities. I know Dr. Lee has been wanting to get more involved with the future educators and Educator Rising. What things can we do to help push that? Because we have seen some school districts really try to do some things with their future educator clubs to see, you know, what we can do there. Right now, I think there's a struggle with how much it costs to go to college and people not seeing that going into the teaching profession at the same time. So
So my request is just comparative data, so we
Sure.
can look as a board, like, okay, do we need to start setting goals, which the board does, so.
It looks like you're competing with a smaller workforce that's coming into the teaching. And then you're also, as for the minority hiring, you're competing with schools that can offer a benefit of paying for those tuition costs if they go to teach there. So you know, it might be time to look at our $5,000 budget for recruiting teachers, since we still need to do that.
I have a question. Kind of piggyback on that real quick. What was do you have a ballpark of what our previous numbers were before those got slashed? Because that was before.
Recruiting budget?
For recruiting, yeah.
$60,000.
60,000? Because that was slashed in 2000.
Way back when we did.
9-10.
That would be
part of the 40
When we
million.
cut the over $40 million, yes.
Okay. I know it's easy for me just to say this, but I think that I agree with Kathy. I think we need to look at that as a board and establishing priorities, because as someone said in the comments, if we're going to really address this achievement gap, we do have to look at putting people in front of them that look like them. Now, question, just for clarification, when you say teachers of color, does that include your Asian, Black and African American, Hispanic, and American Indian, Alaskan?
Non-white.
Non-white.
I understand. I'm just trying to get clarification. But I mean, I know we're having problems getting Asian teachers also, correct?
Yeah, our Asian overall, which we do pretty well compared to other school districts in that area, is around I think it was 2.9%, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you should have said it was 2.
And it's about 24.5% of our student population, though. So that is obviously very discrepant from there.
I guess I just have an issue with when we say teachers of color, and we know where the achievement gaps are. I mean, they're not in the Asian population. So I think that label of teachers of color is a little deceiving in a way, because I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We're looking at closing achievement gap. The Asian population is not part of that, typically. I think when we say teachers of color, we need to mean it. We need to hire more African American teachers and put them in front of our students. I don't know if I don't mean to offend anybody when I say that, but
Well,
that's
what I'll say, what I will say is that studies certainly show that putting staff in front of students who look like them is beneficial, but it's beneficial for all students. So that's
Right.
something that's extremely important.
And I agree with that, absolutely. And I know there's probably some terminology that we have to use that. It isn't exactly accurate, in my opinion.
What would make it more accurate?
I don't know. I don't have a solution for it. It just, I don't know. I hear parents say that they need to have someone in front of them like them, but yet we're saying that, I mean, for example, it relates to, 13.7 FTE were teachers of color. Okay, yes, as defined by non-white. But only 5 FTE were Black or African American. I mean, so it's not even half of their FTE. So I think we're just being disingenuous when we say that. And I'm not looking at it as a fault. I don't know if I'm explaining this right. I think we need to support that community better by hiring more, obviously. But when we define it as that, to me, it just doesn't.
Well, that's one of the reasons
It's
why I
not-
think why, just the memo, I think provides quite a bit more information than
And that's
the
what I'm
report.
looking at.
Than the report.
That's what I'm looking at. I don't know, I'm probably just not making myself clear, but it's just.
Well, what I'm hearing you say, and then maybe we can go to the next point, is that we just need to be more strategic in our hiring of African American and Hispanic Latino teachers.
Yes,
That's what you're
I
saying.
think that's where the greatest need is. Obviously, that's been historically the need. And then, okay, my last point is, we talked about, what the previous budget was. Obviously, we would do a lot more if we had, more to use. We talked about going to, local college or job fairs. And you mentioned that you've gone to out-of-state ones, but you weren't sure on if that was productive or not. Have we ever attended any of the historically Black colleges that, if they have?
Yes, we have.
Okay.
And we did not find it productive,
And why?
unfortunately.
Do you
We
know
just
what-
couldn't get, for what Doug said, we just couldn't get those students to move or come back here to teach. It's not that we couldn't try it again, but I know that from Nancy's group spent a lot of time doing that.
I figured we had at some point, but I don't know, maybe, again, we need to revisit that.
I'm open to any kind of board, directive or support to do something like that. There's a cost that comes with that. I
there's a
feel bad
cost-
if I misled the board in any way.
There's a cost that comes
I
with
know
doing
you've
it.
heard as disingenuous, but typically we've reported non-white when we were looking at the racial diversity of our staff. Within that, yes, 5 of the new hires were African American and Black. 5.7 were Hispanic Latino.
Let me apologize. Maybe disingenuous was the wrong word. That's probably not the word I was looking for. Because I
Just
know
that
this is all.
commitment.
I am
Yeah, I
wide
know this is all
open to
factual.
suggestions of increasing our candidate pool of diverse candidates.
And I know we struggle with this.
For whatever area, so I'm fully
you-
open to suggestions.
I know we struggle with this every time we look at this hiring report. And you said that, there's a cost associated with, doing this type of recruitment. But I would argue there's a cost of not doing it. Because, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but
I
it's
agree.
just-
I'm very open to increasing the cost on it.
And I too would like to increase that or bring that budget back, but, we need to do something. And right now, and I understand you're gonna have 10 school districts competing for the same candidate potentially, since the candidates are so few and far between, but we need to put somebody up to bat in order to have a chance of hitting the ball, and right now I feel like we're not.
So,
I have one more thing. I have one more thing, and it is, I do want to say that those teachers that we have, that, again, Asian, Black, Hispanic, they are doing a very good job. I've seen some of them in action, and I've talked to some of them, and they've said, we want to make it real for our students. And I think it goes back to developing those relationships no matter what teacher you are. You have to develop those relationships. And I do see that happening. So that is, the people we are hiring, we're hiring good people.
So you have about 6 more slides, and some of those are pretty tough too. So let's move on.
All right, so next, we just want to talk about resignation and turnover. So for 16-17, we had 186.9 total FTE turnover. The rate was 6.1%, which was much, that was improved. We had less turnover this year. Most of that is made up by teaching and classified. So when you look at this slide, it's just, of our teaching, we had 59 retired and resigned was 46. This year, even though the number, it felt like we had a lot more people leave for other teaching positions, but the actual numbers didn't indicate that, but percentage-wise they did. So about half of our teachers that resigned left for other teaching positions, where you see last year 40% did. In 14-15, less than 20% of the 51 there left for other teaching positions. So we are seeing a little more increase there. And then you see the breakdown just for retired and resigned under our classified staff as well. Wanting to gather more information, one of the big things that I wanted to look at was why were staff leaving, and I wanted to be able to break down the information also by certain demographics. So we did do a new exit survey. We had 77 responses. Last year we had 39. This is not an apples to apples comparison. Different survey. We opened the door to get more information and feedback. And we did break it out by race, experience, level, position. We included a lot more open-ended questions. It is still anonymous, but we can kind of gauge this person who fits these characteristics. This is how they might have answered a question. And we had some good open-ended feedback at that same time. The people that took the survey, 68.4% licensed, 17.1 classified, 7.9% non-bargaining, 6.6 administrator, 39.5 were elementary, 27.6 high school, 25% middle school, 7.9 district. Of those that took the survey, 90.8% were white, 3.9% two or more races, 2.6 black or African American, and 2.6 Asian. Why did staff leave? Once again, this is not apples to apples comparison. Workload conditions was the highest, that mostly related to class size. Also, other answers were not having enough plan time or team plan time. Second to that, and they could have answered multiple items, was work-related stress or burnout. Salary was after that at 31.6, which was less than it had been the previous year. However, remember this now included a little bit different grouping of people that we allowed to take our survey because we wanted to get feedback on why people are leaving and we wanted to connect it to different groups. Career opportunities or advancement was similar. Someone asked, did benefits causing people to leave? That was very low. Only about 10.5% of our staff listed that as one of the reasons of why they were leaving was benefits. So the previous year it was 16.6%, so that area was slightly down. Lack of professional development was only at 8%, so those do not seem to be the areas that are causing people to leave. Even with all that information, 78.9% would recommend IPSD 204 to friends or family. Regarding our board goal, the district retained over 97% of its teachers rated excellent. Of the 31 teachers rated excellent that left their District 204 teaching position, 3 left for administrative positions, 16 for other teaching positions, 5 for family, 5 for relocation, and 2 left for other reasons that weren't specified. And just service awards, we like to recognize all of our teachers and their many years of service. We recognized 414 individuals for service milestones. We formally recognize individuals at 20, 25, and 30 years of service during the District Institute Day. That represented 109 teachers or administrators that we recognized for 20, 25, or 30 years of service, which represented over 2,380 years of teaching in District 204. With that, I would be glad to answer any other questions.
I had just a comment. We looked at, talked about staff that left, and almost 3% with their small number of African-American staff already, and almost 3% of those that left. It would be extremely interesting to ensure that that knowledge is gained, if it's just for movement or if there are any systemic reasons. And I don't know, but just understanding why.
Right.
Those.
We are trying to break down that information to try. That's why we changed the exit survey this year to actually collect that information, because in the past that was not being collected. I believe we had 8 staff of color who left the district from last year, and then we hired 13.7 this year. I'll see I think I had 6 when I looked at the breakdown, 6 or 7 who filled out the survey.
It's when the number's so small already that retention
Right.
is extremely important.
When we look at, I think one of the biggest things is the smaller and smaller group of people going into teaching. And we've put some tougher requirements on the education programs. Has there been any studies or research that's looking at that particularly to drive people to drop out?
They definitely found that they're feeling like the teacher test is limiting candidates in the area. They're seeing it's mixed. People want it to be harder to be a teacher because they feel like that would increase
quality.
But at the same time, when we're struggling for candidates, they're seeing that can be a challenge as well. You needed a score on this test that was equivalent to a 26 on an ACT to pass the test, or you could get a 22 on the ACT, is what they kind of went to after the fact. So they are finding that is really limiting the candidates who are becoming teachers.
So maybe the other factor is the salary, and that we're criticizing teachers all the time and blaming them for the ruins of the world.
Other factors
could be
that are weighing in on that. Autonomy, there's lots of different factors that they're tying it to.
Justin?
I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the policy that we have. 5:10, the district shall provide equal employment opportunity to all persons regardless of their race, creed, or other protected status. If a person believes they did not receive equal employment opportunity, who do they contact? You.
You knew that, right?
Yes. Non-discrimination, Title IX.
And then the minority recruitment section of it. The district will attempt to recruit and hire minority employees. The implementation of this policy may include advertising openings in minority publications, participating in minority job fairs, and recruiting at colleges and universities with significant minority enrollments. This policy, however, does not require or permit the district to give preferential treatment or special rights based on protected status without evidence of past discrimination. So I think we need to recognize what we're trying to do also has some legal guidance on how we need to do it. So that we don't try to push the needle in one direction and end up inviting liability in another direction. So I think it's always a good time when we have these discussions to take a look at our policy, which is based on the law, so we are all informed and stay out of trouble.
Well, I think we all agree we want to hire, whoever we hire is of the highest quality. We just want to make sure that we cast that net to include as many as we can and find those quality, but not trying to give preferential anything. But we just want to make sure that that net is cast as wide as it.
Oh, I support that. I think the problem I always get into this is it's always equal employment opportunities. Just like when we talk about students, it's equal educational opportunities. And then we always measure the outcome. And then we try to infer from the outcome the opportunity. You know, because we can't measure the opportunities. You know, so did we really have equal opportunities for everybody? That's the front of the door. And now we're saying well, we're looking at our actual hiring. We're looking at the ACTs and saying that there's a gap. So we're going from the end goal and saying that the opportunity was missed. So I always struggle with conceptually how that works.
Well, we just want to make sure that the opportunity is there. I'm just not sure that the opportunity's always as equal. We just want to make sure that net is cast as wide as possible.
How do you measure opportunity? I don't understand how to do that exactly. It's easy to measure ACT. It's easy to measure percentage hired. Now we got to say what was the opportunity equal? You know, did we cast it broad enough? I don't know. I mean, how do you define the net, right?
And I don't know how the net, I'm learning, but I don't know how the net is cast.
Yep. That's all I got.
I don't know if I want to participate in this or not, but the opportunity also has to be with multiple perspective for me. That's what's important. If it's only one perspective or a perspective from a primarily power base, which is a white Caucasian population, you have to make sure that we include everybody. We're talking about African American, we have to talk about our Muslim kids. We have to talk about a lot of things, as a district. And I think we do a great job with this, but we have to continue to move forward, is that we have to offer, and that's what we're going to do with the community engagement part too, is offer multiple perspective in order that we can do the very best we can. I mean, what does a board member do? Do the very best we can with the financial resources that we have. And so for me, we have to make sure that we open ourselves up for multiple perspective. I mean, that's how I define opportunity, is just, let's not look at with one lens, let's look at it with multiple lenses. Going for another 3 hours. All right,
Thank
anything
you,
else?
guys.
Yeah, thank you so much. Last but not least, but I do have a last, is the Board of Education update. As you know, I am the IPEF representative. There was a meeting held on September 6th. At that time, there's new leadership that's moving very positively. They developed 3 goals during the course of the meeting, which included fundraising, under the general terms of fundraising, sustainability, and engagement. So IPEF hopes to increase fundraising to $1 million in 3 years. They hope to do this through increased partnerships by seeking long-term support from organizations and families. They hope to scale up teacher grants. Also, they hope to shore up their bylaws and organizational structures, especially with recruitment and succession planning. They hope to increase their A+ award, and specific strategies are being developed for each of the goals and objectives. Goals were developed with the district goals in mind, which was really nice. During the whole course of the meeting, alignment and partnership were stressed. Things that foundation people were saying is that we're working on the same goal. And what I was really pleased with is that their goals are more and more aligning to district goals. So, less silos. Other highlights of the meeting were in the introduction of Ellen Walsh, who will work as the foundation's financial coordinator, and she's going to help assist maintaining financials. They also talked about alumni database system that will be pursued and implemented this school year. IPF also voted to establish a fund to support our most at-risk kids. This fund would be similar to the Kids Booster Fund that was established in District 203, and a process for securing those funds was established. Some reminders is that their Team IPF breakfast is October 21st, Kids Marathon is October 21st, And the Naperville Half Marathon, where many of our staff and parents and community members are supporting us, is October 22nd. Another meeting that I had the opportunity to participate in is the Naperville Youth Task Collaborative Youth Team. That was held on September 13th. And for those of you who aren't aware of this, District 204 works with a variety of community members throughout the district. Some of those include Kid Matters, Little Friends, Linden Oaks, 360 Youth Services, the Naperville Police, the Naperville Fire Department, the Faith Community Liaison Groups, the YWCA, the Boy Scouts, and it's a group of people who really try to work for the benefit of the kids. One of the big areas that they're talking about, and has been an emphasis, is suicide in the community, both with our youth and with other members in the community. And they're really working on a lot of mental health issues in a collaborative matter to hopefully benefit the whole educational community here. And I know the district does a really good, not only do I participate, but the district also sends several members there that assist and work collaboratively with these groups in order to really work on some of the serious mental health issues that, you know, are in the community. So those were the two things that I had. And with that, do I have?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
All board members need to stay to sign.
That's where I'm.
Board members, do not leave.